his cat and his dog. Um,
Okay.
and I'm just totally like, oh, I don't get it. I don't get it.
So I apologize. We've got some street noise today. It's a little distant, but I'll stay on mute whenever I'm not talking to try to keep the street sounds out.
By the way, I've been sending this text to people. Did you notice that Senator from Oregon, what's his name, um, was on Senate floor for over 22 hours without a break, talking about how we are in an authoritarian state right now. We're in it, and not it's going to maybe happen in the future. We're already in it, and how Trump is shredding Constitution day by day, each Constitution, you know, one after another. So
He has
22,
my full support.
yeah. Who has your full support?
Donald, he's the emperor.
Oh, I didn't know that about you, Stephen. Okay.
Are you on
Senator
your knees?
Jeff Merkley from Oregon, Senator Jeff Merkley. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Stephen, are you on your knees right now?
Oh, this is Donald present.
Oh, there's the cat. He's making his entrance.
Well, as I explained, I'm a big believer that democracies will degenerate into tyrannies, and I think you're running perfectly to plan. Well, that's what Plato and Aristotle said would, its eventual fate. They probably witnessed it a few times. That's what happened to the Roman Republic. And the fault is really with the people because they don't exercise the correct sense of responsibility. What happens is, people have the vote and they'll vote for whoever will fill their pockets or something like that. A demagogue will come along and say, I'll do whatever you want. And both sides now are engaging in demagoguery. So for example, both sides will start using the law as a weapon. This is exactly what happened to the Roman Republic. And the fault's really with the people. They're not. If a democracy has somebody of merit in the background they're all right. It's like in ancient Athens. While I had a statesman like Pericles, and there was an earlier one who advised the crowds to live above their lower needs or their lower drives, things went better. But when they don't get that wise guidance, people in the democracy think they deserve handouts and lots of stuff. And well,
There's a Benjamin Franklin quote to that effect. When he came out of the Constitutional Convention after they just adopted their new constitution, they asked him, "What kind of government have you put together for us, Mr. Franklin?" And he says, "A Republican if you can keep it. Sorry, Republic if you can keep it." He says, "No, and if it's well administered and carefully done, it'll no doubt govern us for plenty of years to come." And then the rest of the quote, which nobody ever quotes, is until the people become so degenerated that the only thing capable of governing them is a tyranny. No, we don't. Americans don't like to quote the second half of what he said, but it's pretty much in line with what you just said.
Eventually, when there's a very strong sense, of a common sense, like in the Roman Republic, had common sense of where they were going and a strong respect for everybody else. But what you see is the centrifugal force that eventually the nation's politics starts to fly in all different sorts of directions. You get the joke, what was it? The story of the Miller and his son and the donkey, where they pass every crowd and every crowd tells them to do something different. And this is where you are now, where you've got so many different groups who all think the world should be going their way.
Well, on that cheery note, I'm going to take us to the text. I'm thinking about Sharon. Sharon would like us to do the text, so I aim to please. Welcome everybody to we're in an interlude in our regular series Millennia in Microcosm. This is still the Kenneth Smith seminar, but we're taking a little interlude to talk about human natures and the fate of Aristoi in modernity. So this is week 9 of our interlude. All of this is an answer to a question that our regular participant Ari asked about a comment that I made about Kenneth Smith's interpretation. He said one of the fundamental characteristics of the modern epoch is that this is the first epoch that has committed genocide against one of the 3 basic character types to completely eradicate them from politics and really everyday life as much as possible. Characterological genocide against the Aristoi. And it, Ari was very curious about that. He wanted an explanation. And so David and I did a hunt for text by Kenneth Smith that would talk about this. And David found a large collection of interesting fragments from different things that Kenneth's written over the decades. And I found an essay called Human Natures, Greek Characterological Anthropology. And we're working our way through the paper, and as at various breaks along the way, we're bringing in the fragments that David has found. And all of this is getting at the question of what did the ancient Greeks believe were the fundamental character types that make up Homo sapiens. So the Greeks did not believe that we were all equal. They believed that there are species of characters in us, cultural or characterological species, rather than biological species. We may be one biological species, but we're multiple characterological species. And so we're walking through what that is and what that interpretation is. And Kenneth builds off of that when he says his comment about modernity is typified by committing characterological genocide against Aristoi. So we're going through the paper, and I'm going to post, let me actually share it right now. The file is a PDF. Oh, here comes Ari. Let's admit him to the room. Actually, let me start by dropping the outline of the paper in here in the chat. We have gone through the abstract, the prefatory cautions, and the introduction in the first 8 weeks. There's the outline. And last week, we finished off the introduction. We started into a second batch of fragments. And what I'd like to do today is go back to the final paragraph of the intro. There's another critical Kenneth Smith point to be made there. And then we can finish off the fragments from this second group that David found for us. And then we can start the main text of the paper, the main section. But John has a question. So John, why don't you come off mute and tell us what's on your mind?
Hey, Rick. So when you talk about like the characterological genocide of the Aristoi, and I think we've talked about this before. You're not saying that like people are either Aristoi or Benousoi or Douloi. It's a continuum, right? It's like different. You fall on a spectrum. Like somebody's not either introverted or extroverted. They can be more introverted than they are extroverted, but being like one or the other is like kind of like an extreme that would be extremely rare. So like when you talk about the characterological genocide of the Aristoi, you're saying like, let's say I have 25% Aristoi in me or something like that. You're saying in modern society, that 25% has basically been rooted out and subdued to the point where like it doesn't have a place in my everyday life. Is that correct? Or are you saying more of the hard line, like somebody's either an Aristoi or Benousoi, and all the Aristoi are doing bad?
Well, what's interesting about this is that the Greeks don't know. I mean, they say they don't know whether this is genetic. I mean, they didn't know about genetics, but they didn't know, is this inherited? Are these stages of development that we go through from doulos to Benausos to Aristos, and some people just stop developing? Is it some kind of spectrum, a mix of some? They didn't know. They didn't know. And we don't know either. And part of the reason that we don't know is we don't even ask the question. The Greeks, at least, were asking the questions, but they didn't have the science and technology to try to find the basis for these things. We may or may not have the science and technology to figure out what the basis is, but we're not asking the questions. So it's one of the differences between, Kenneth Smith frequently says that, like religion, all philosophy is either escapist or existentialist. And what he means by that is you get these people who are systematizers, and they'll tell you all things work like this. There are these three categories and everything fits neatly into a category. That's escapist. They're escaping into the land of theory. And in the land of theory, everything has a nice, tidy place, and they're sorting all the people into their places. For example, the Nazis did that. Everybody is either they're either full-blooded Germans or they're contaminated with Jewish blood, and they're drawing their little lines and they're trying to fit the world into their categories. Hannah Arendt talks about this. This is noetic behavior. This is Banausic behavior. It's hyper intellectualizing, abstractivizing behavior that seeks to escape from the tangible, concrete reality of our everyday life and the actual people who exist, and to move into a pure world of ideas. They're ideas about, that purity is supposedly good, although biology would not agree. The idea that everybody fits tidily into one category or another, the idea that if you just eliminate the categories that are corrupted, then Germany will flourish. All of this stuff is the land of theory. So Kenneth is not an escapist philosopher. So he's not going to say all people fit tidily into one of these things and they're there because I say so, and let me tell you about my beautiful system. He doesn't talk like that. He says, we see in human beings proclivities in these directions that are similar to what the Greeks saw. We don't know what causes them. Everybody's got their own ideas and speculations. We don't know how mutable or immutable they are. There's a lot of questions about this. If he was an escapist, he would answer all those questions. Just the way that systematizing philosophers do, he'd just make up the answers so that they're all tidy and logically, mathematically coherent. But in the real world, we don't have the luxury of just defining things to be the way we want them to be. And so there's a lot of messiness to this. So the answer to your question is, we don't know why people fall into these categories. A Hegelian take would be that these are stages of development. And we've talked about this model. The Hegelian take would be, we're all born in a very dualic mode, very, very live wire experience. I mean, an infant is so plugged into their experience of life, they don't have room for plans, and they haven't had an education. They have any of that abstract theorizing stuff going on. And we all start there. So Hegel argues at least that the intellectual stage, the Banausic stage, is you can see that it has to grow out of the dualic stage, because every single intellectual who ever lived started as a crying baby, right? So we know that development occurs. How you get from there to being an Aristos, we're not in a position to be able to answer because we don't have any. And the reason is what you were just saying at the end, that the modern civilization is structured to allow shepherds and sheep, or maybe wolves and sheep, depending on how you want to model it. There are the people who are manipulated through their appetites and desires and catechisms and just herded this way and that. And then there are the people who do the manipulation and the herding, who get positions in PR firms or marketing, or they get positions in, governments or what have you, the C-suites of corporations, people who are able to find ways to move people this way and that. These are niches that lend themselves to people who are capable of being highly educated, who are capable of thinking in abstractions, who are willing to think about other human beings like resources and push them around the same way they push around coal or cotton. This is Banausic. This is a noetic behavior. Now, whether everybody occupying those roles is a Banausos per se, or whether it's somebody who's got some mix of characteristics and is able to role play a Banausos, these are the kinds of questions that are very interesting, but that we should not be in a hurry to try to fill in the blanks based on what makes sense to us, because the moment we do that, we're ceasing to be existentialists and we're starting to become escapists. We're trying to make a nice, tidy, perfect, pure theory, which is dangerous when it comes to human beings. So I know that's not the tidy answer you're looking for. We'll talk about it sometimes like people are one thing or they are another. We'll talk about it sometimes like these are stages of development and that the final stage is just cut off because there's no niches where anybody can act like an Aristos in the modern world. And sometimes, yeah, I mean, it's gonna be discussed different ways at different times. The whole point of this paper is to just sort of explore the range of possibilities around these ideas. It's a great question, John. Ginny, come off mute.
Yeah, I was just thinking about my own family, Korean family. I mean, when I was a little girl, starting at age 5 or 6 or 7, my mother used to constantly say, "Remember, Hyunhae, my Korean name is Hyunhae, you are of aristocratic, you are an aristocrat, because Korean, there's Yangban, which is an aristocratic class, and then Soban, which is the lower class." And for a long time, I just didn't question, okay, I'm an aristocratic class. And, so she would say, therefore, you should always excel in school, always be truthful, don't ever lie, blah, 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 all these um, qualities that I must have. Um, and I'm just thinking, yeah, I'm sure Korea was not the only country, right? As you say, Rick, human beings have been classifying themselves away for, I guess, time memorial, I suppose.
Yes. Yes. And it's part of what's interesting is Aristotle's discussion of this when he says, Greek society has these actual socio-political economic roles, doulos, banausos, and aristos. And Aristotle basically says most Greeks assume that if you are in the doulic role, you must have the doulic character. If you're in the banausic role, you must have the banausic character. If you're in the eristic role, you must have the eristic character. But Aristotle says flat out, it doesn't always work out that way. There are frequently people who have been enslaved and are serving as douloi who do not have a doulic character. They would be better off in the marketplace or as a craftsman, or they might even be better off governing us. They've got the character for it. But society has failed to live up to its own ideals and has miscategorized people. He says, and when that happens, it's a horrible waste. It's dangerous for the civilization to not let people use the gifts that they have, the greatest gifts that they have, in service to the culture. If somebody really doesn't want to learn and they really just do want a job that's 9 to 5 and at the end they can go home and they don't have to worry about it and they don't have to think about it and they can enjoy their lives, there should be roles for people who want to do that. There should be. The economy should allow for that. And if there's other people who really, really want to learn like crazy and want to think about things and get new skills and climb a social ladder, there should be a part of the economy for that too. This is Aristotle's take. But it's only just if you match people's actual characters to the roles. When you start mismatching, you can create catastrophes. You end up with a doulos or a banausos who's in a position of governance and he's incapable of governing you. He'll do something, he'll rule you, he'll dominate you, but he can't govern you because he doesn't know what governance is. He's incapable of governance. Maybe if he had training or different life experiences, who knows what might be possible. If people are malleable, if character types are malleable, then maybe there's some potential for growth. If character types are not malleable, then that person might never develop the capabilities of governing. But at any rate, regardless of what they could be in the future, Aristotle says you have to look at what they are right now and don't let people govern who, if you put them in a position of governance, are just going to use it to either to satisfy their emotions and appetites in the case of a doulos, or to satisfy their ideologies and training in the case of a banausos. I need to, hammer everybody onto this Procrustean bed because this is what I was trained to do. Everyone has to behave according to my theory. So it's a great question, John. And I'm not answering it well. And Ginny's point is well taken. People have been trying to do these categories, but Aristotle says we have to be able to judge the society and its niches that it creates for people based on whether it lets people express what's actually in their character. You start shoving people into the wrong niches, and you're committing an injustice and possibly endangering your civilization. It's one, we talked about this a few months ago. You know, one of the things that the Greeks believed is that everybody's different. We're not all equal. We're all different. And the difference is good. Some people want to be an actor. Some people want to be an anesthesiologist. Some people listen to bird songs and transcribe them and then write, operas. I mean, people have different gifts, and we don't know the future. We all like to pretend that we're prophets or gods and that we can see the future, but we can't. We don't know what the future is. Our models for the future are just models. They're not actually binding on reality. And so if we don't know what's coming, it means we don't know the nature of the next big crisis that's going to hit our culture. And because we don't know its nature, we don't know what sort of gifts our culture will need to overcome that crisis. This is classic Greek philosophical politics. And for that reason, what you want to do is cultivate as many different kinds of gifts in your culture as you can, so that when the crisis comes, and whatever it turns out to be, maybe there will be somebody in your civilization who can help you figure out this is the thing that we should do. If you try to make everybody the same, you just guarantee that there's only one kind of crisis that you're able to handle. And so, the Greek take on this is that it is very important to let people express what's in their character and develop so that you can find out what's in there. If they've got gifts, you need those gifts to flower within the culture. It's very different from the modern model in which everybody has to be exactly the same. We all need to be units of production, generic units of production. Donald, tell us what's on your mind.
I had my audio on, didn't realize it. I think in this paper, Kenneth is talking about individuals, not societal classes. We need to keep that in mind. There may have been corresponding societal classes in other ages, millennia, whatever, but not now. I mean, if anything, this is one, I guess, to help you better understand the people you're around, and two, to do a little bit of not just getting outside your box, getting outside your age, the zeitgeist. We were talking about Hegel yesterday, so what's missing? Unless you study something like this or study the Greeks or something like that, what leads one to think that we're missing Aristoi in our current modernity? That's not, well, there aren't any. How would, why would we miss them? It would be strange. Yeah, I don't think we're not putting people in boxes. We're trying to, as Kenneth always says, develop something to think with, that we can recognize. Maybe we can begin to ask questions that we wouldn't otherwise ask. What if our societies were ruled by a different type of people? And what might be different about those people? And does history ever show us any examples of a different type of people or a different societal organization that might lead somewhere? So the idea is not, we're not taking this as reading this as for introspection. Oh, well, I guess I'm an Aristoi or Aristos, I'll use the singular, because I'm pretty sure I'm not. And or that my friends are all Dulic or whatever, this is not Psychology 101 self-help class. This is Philosophy 101. Think bigger class. Think wider class. Think differently. Thank you.
Thank you, Donald. Yeah, one possible Greek interpretation of this, and it might be. I don't know if this is where Kenneth's at on this or not. He and I've chatted about this a number of times, but I don't have him quite pinned down on it. It's possible that, I mean, one of the things that the Greeks believe is that each of us has our, we not only have the nature around us that we have to navigate and learn about, but each of us has a nature inside of us, which is our character. And the character you might think of as your collective your unconscious. And it's not amorphous. It's not universal. It's specific to you. And there's things in your character that want to express themselves. And part of the way they express themselves is through your actions, but part of the way they express themselves is through transformation over time, in the same way that the butterfly egg wants to not only hatch, but then go through multiple stages of metamorphosis to become an adult. And the Greeks believe that aliosis, othering, is a natural part of being a living thing, that you're going to undergo processes of transformation, and they're not random processes. They emerge from inside of you, and in as much as the butterfly, even as much as the butterfly may transform physically, we also transform in terms of our character. Our character grows and changes over time, partly in response to the experiences we have, but partially in response to its own inner laws of development and unfolding, just like the acorn grows into a sprout, which grows into a tree, some of them anyway. So implicit in this is the idea, going back to what John was asking about, that we don't know the full potential that's inside of us. We might have within us a character that has inner laws of growth that under the right conditions would develop us into becoming Aristos. But if those conditions don't happen, then like Stephen likes to point out, then the acorn is never going to become an oak. And what Kenneth means by characterological genocide is that we've created in the modern world a kind of machine world of laws and systems and economies in which there's really no role for significant human innovation. There's if anybody comes in and says, wow, here's 75 things that are wrong with the way we're running our country, let's just fix them right now, they go to jail, right? You get arrested and you go to jail. You get killed, you get put in a mental health hospital, you go to jail, or you end up homeless. These are the typical things that happen to Aristoi, and they want to try to govern, they want to try to fix what's broken, and that impulse in them that under a different civilization might be nurtured and trained and developed into an actual functioning Aristos in the society. We don't have an Aristos niche, but we have a lot of ways to cut those people off and sideline them. So Kenneth's line is, in general, people who have any kind of aristic potential in their character find themselves either they find a way to unhappily adapt themselves to the dualic or Banausic roles that are available. Like, Donald and I are both programmers. These are very Banausic activities. They involve a lot of education and training and mathematics and logic, Banausic specialties. Now, I'm not saying either of us has the potential to be an Aristos, but if we did, this would be a typical way to express it, is to role play being something that we're not. Trying to be somebody who's fully satisfied doing this intellectual puzzle solving. So it's like, he's also described it not as genocide, but as foot binding. When people are forced into a role that their character is not actually fit for, their character wants to do something else, but it's not allowed to. It's like foot binding, or it's like, pruning or training a tree or what have you. So it doesn't mean, I think, Kenneth would probably come down on the side of saying, it doesn't mean that everybody could be anything. That's the modern conceit, right? That we're gods and we're just like, we're shape changers. We can become anything we want to, and we're infinitely adaptable. He says that's a fantasy. It's real human beings are different from each other. Anybody who's parented multiple children knows that the lessons you get your first kid and you have your expectations of what they're going to be like, but no, they're different than that. They're going to grow into something that's true to their own developing character. And then you have your second kid and you think, okay, well, maybe they'll be like the first one, but no, usually they're different too, and they grow in a different direction. And the experience of seeing this happen and realizing that raising children isn't about manufacturing clones of yourself or clones of some ideal, but rather it's kind of trying to figure out how to most helpfully allow them to grow and develop in the directions that they were going to try to develop anyway. He says it's very humbling to discover, and what you're in being faced with is what the Greeks said, is that we each have our character inside of us, and each of us has our laws of development. And if that's the case, it means that there may be some people who they were always going to become a doulos. They were going to, become maybe a sophisticated doulos, but that was going to be the end of their development. Other people might develop towards a Benausos. Other people might develop through all those things to an Aristos. And the problem is all of this is invisible to us because you can't see your character. You can't see what it is. And so where we get into trouble is when we try to assert to other people that they are this or are not that, or when we try to tell ourselves, well, Aristos sounds like it's the winner thing, it's the good thing, and I want to be a winner, so I'm going to call myself an Aristos. Because all this stuff is it's just mental masturbation. It's just ego gratification. The reason for this model to exist is to try to understand the human condition, not to just posture with one another and social climb. Stephen, come off mute and tell us what's on your mind.
Well, if you look at the development of government over time, that in a sort of a primary society, there's always a legend. Some character comes along and defeats a monster or something like that, and they become the ruler. They establish an aristocratic dynasty. And that's in other cases, you get the warriors become the rulers. You have a democracy, or, like the Spartans or the samurai, but they have ideals about higher things, higher values, honor, loyalty, courage. Not that they're always nice people. They can be nasty people. But when a culture goes down the line, you get the oligarchy, you get the merchants coming in, sitting on the councils, and you get a nation which becomes more materially developed. And that filters down to the rest of the population when you become a democracy. The orientation is towards appetites and material things. Shakespeare says when he writes Julius Caesar, what does he call the Roman population? A mob. Feed the mob. It's not like the mob can ever stand up for anything other than its appetites, than its wants. And so you've got to question where are the nations of the world now? What's their ambition? The appetites. The other thing is status. People become very concerned with their status, becomes the highest good. Or the appetite becomes the highest good. Are there other values beyond that? What's the value of an Aristoi? Tell me. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Yeah, people have a variety of needs, and one of the ways, and we don't usually fit stereotypical theories very well. So certainly people are going to be appetitive, and we're born, hungry and wanting our diapers changed and all that. But we also develop into a stage pretty early within the first few years where we want to do things ourselves. I mean, anybody who's raised kids knows that, right? You get I can do it my own self. No, don't do it for me. I want to fix this. I want to make this. I want to open that. And that's a feedback loop that's pretty universal in us. When we're talking about needs, it's all well and good to talk about how passive the majority are, but you also have to talk about how active they are. People love it when through their own effort they can fix a problem. The problem goes away and now things are better. And they did it, right? So you get all these people who are in the crafts movement, knitters and carpenters and gardeners and painters and you know, handyman and so forth. All of this stuff is also fundamental to human nature. It doesn't fit as well into the pessimist mode. But it's a realistic appraisal that you get a variety of these kinds of, you know, motivations in people. Some people have no particular interest in making and building stuff after a certain point, but lots of people do. So it's where we have to be careful with our theories, is to not get to the point where we so overgeneralize that we're sort of making broad sweeping generalizations. It's the thing that Hegel always says: too abstract is to be in error, is driving us to not get too lost in our theories and come back to, like in this case, who are the tangible people on this call in front of us, and what do they want and need? How do they express, you know, their character in life? And in that, there's going to be a certain amount of reality that's missing when we back up and resort to theories. So part of what's in this is this idea that we first introduced the idea of the douloi, benausoi, and aristoi. It sounds like caricatures, and it is, because it's just an introduction. But what it means, even to be a doulos, even if you're primarily driven by experience and feelings and appetites, it doesn't mean that all douloi are the same and that they have the same ceiling on their capacities. Kenneth likes to talk about the difference between douloi in Athens versus douloi in the United States today. He says in Athens you had actual aristoi. You had religion and mythos working to try to lift up people's sense of wisdom and their virtues, so that you could even have douloi who had a certain amount of virtue. You know, not as much as maybe an Aristos could have, but they could have some. They could be wiser than someone who's merely appetitive. They could do most of the things required to feed themselves and clothe themselves and take care of each other, and you know, everything associated with the oikos, with the household economy. They could do all those things. They weren't just sitting around wanting someone to spoon things into their mouths. But conversely, you can have a culture that pushes douloi down to a far more infantilized state, you know, where they do become appetitive, and the society just provides everything. That whole range, from people who are outwardly not distinguishable from anybody else because they seem to have courage and they seem to have, you know, compassion and so forth, and versus people who, you know, are pretty reduced, that all falls within the range of douloi. You know, these aren't little pinpoints, spots in which everybody's the same. They're the Hegelian Smithian take on this is that what unites the douloi, the only thing that unites the douloi, is that they make themselves slaves to their own gnosis, their immediacy, their experience of life, whether it's the things that they see and hear and smell and touch, whether it's the things that they feel, the things they remember, that the drives within them, that they let that be the primary decision maker in their lives. It's not that they can't learn and be educated, but that they use all that education to serve these feelings and sensations. I have people like this in my family, and I remember when I was like this. I like you were saying yesterday on the call, Stephen. I have some very early memories, and I remember when I was so connected to the feelings of the world that I couldn't imagine not giving it priority over everything else. So it's the idea behind this is not to create caricatures and then try to fit everybody into them, but to, you know, look at very different ways that maybe evolution has created within the potential for Homo sapiens to live a life. We'll come back to these fundamental mental faculties that are attached to these character types in a bit, but I want to do Q&A first. Donna, come off mute and tell us what's on your mind.
Okay, thanks. Now I have two questions. I'm going to start with the most recent. So how is it different between the douloids and the banalsoids? Is that the correct word? How is it different with them being slaves to their gnosis? How is that different?
Yes. So the way that the Greeks talked about this, and that Kenneth talks about, and Hegel, although he uses different words, is that the human mind has two fundamental basal faculties to it. One faculty is called gnosis, and that's the faculty of immediacy, being concretely connected to experience. And so, when you and each of us has had times in our lives when our gnosis, even when we were, in the middle of a conversation with a friend talking about something, and we weren't really paying attention to what was going around us, but then something happens near us that interrupts the conversation, and we just have to take it in. So it might be a time when you were in the car, you parked the car at the Grand Canyon in the parking lot, and you're walking towards the Grand Canyon, and you're talking about how excited you are to be here, and where are we going to have for lunch, blah blah blah, and then you turn the corner around the building, and there's the vista, and just mid-sentence you just have to stop talking because, oh my God, look at that thing. It is just astonishing. Or if you're on a walk in a park and you're having a good time and you're talking with a friend, and then suddenly a deer bounds across the path and you both are just startled and you stop. That all of us begin with that live wire connection to experience. And it has the potential at times to interrupt the life of the mind, the intellectual life of the mind, and take us right back to needing to be plugged in. It can do it out of strong emotion. It can do it out of astonishing experiences. It can do it when you sit down to a meal and you suddenly the spoonful you put in your mouth is the best flavor of that thing you've ever had, and you just have to stop talking and let your tongue take over your brain for a while and go,
Mhm.
wow. All of that is gnosis. That's and Hegel says the reason we have gnosis is that it's what tethers us to reality, right? That
Mhm.
we evolved to be able to pay attention around us enough that we can survive. We got to be able to find the food. We got to be able to notice the tiger in the bush. And if we don't notice those things, we don't make it as a species. So our brain gives us that capacity to be plugged in hard to what's happening around
Mhm.
us.
Mhm.
But the other faculty that even the lower animals have, but people are sort of weirdly able to put ourselves into is noesis, which is abstraction.
Mhm.
And,
Mhm.
and that's the ability to systematize and learn and mathematize and so on.
Okay.
It's a pattern making function.
Yeah.
It's the ability to look ahead and to notice that, hey, what happened at this time today is like what happened at this time yesterday, and hey, there's time. That planning ahead, pattern matching,
Mm.
um, and it's essential to being able to change the world, to make
Mhm.
clothing,
Right.
to plant
Plan,
crops, to
right. Plan ahead. All that. Yeah.
all these things, right? So we have both of these faculties. All of us have both of these faculties, but Hegel and the others in this existentialist tradition say what happens is that we start out with the noesis undeveloped because we're just born, and the gnosis is therefore filling up our entire mind. All of our consciousness is focused on our gnosis.
Mhm.
There's a sort of a 100% connection, and over time we learn to create space in our mind to disengage from the live wire of gnosis part of the time, part of our attention, a growing amount of attention as we get older, to make room for learning and planning and willing and changing and shaping and getting involved in noesis. But the question becomes, as we are engaged in these two activities, who serves whom? Yeah, are we is our fundamental driver the gnosis, and we use planning in order to satisfy our appetites and feelings, to
Mm.
feel good and so forth? If we do, then we're functioning in the role of the doulos,
Mhm.
which is gnosis as the master.
Mhm.
And when we do that, it makes it difficult for us to override our gnosis, even if our gnosis is guiding us the wrong way. So like gnosis connects us to reality, but it has this parochial quality. It connects us to this here now, which can make it hard for us to think more cosmopolitanly, or to think ahead in time and space, think about other people's experiences. Our experience looms too large when we're in the dualic mode because we've let our gnosis be the master. And for some people, that provokes a crisis at some point where they're frustrated and dissatisfied with their life, and and out of shame or frustration or what have you, according to Hegel, we begin to consciously push the gnosis into a smaller space in our mind to try to create a larger space in which to think and plan and learn and read and schematize. Um, and it requires an effort of will, says Hegel, because the gnosis would always love to take back the 100% of
That's
our,
right.
attention. We're good at that. We did that from the beginning. This is like
Mhm.
riding a bike. We know how to fall back in that. So for that reason, he says, becoming an intellectual involves a process of deliberate negation, where we deliberately push aside the rush and flow of experience of gnosis. And when we do that, we're moving into the realm of a banalsos. And that's where noesis becomes the master. And in order to have noesis be the master, we have to insulate ourselves from our gnosis. We have to insulate ourselves. If we have family members who are always very loud and they're always partying and are always getting drunk and they're having affairs and getting in trouble and they want us to bail them out, and the intellectual has to segregate that part of their family from themselves. They have to move out of the home because it's too loud and there's too much going on. They need a quiet space. Or their house might be noisy, but they need a room somewhere they can retreat to, their library where their books are and their computer, and they can make their notes. They do the same thing in their brain that they do in their body. They make a
Mm,
retreat
yep,
to.
yep. Okay, yep. That's a
All
good,
familiar,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
We all
That's well put because yeah.
we all recognize it. So what basically the Banausos has deliberately dethroned gnosis to create a quiet space for noesis, for planning and learning and abstraction and systematizing. And in doing that, they have chosen not to let gnosis be in charge of them. They've chosen to make their noesis be the master so
Right,
that they can, you see this all the time when people talk about putting your appetites on hold. It's like I
right,
got
right.
got to tame my emotions and my appetites and create room for this. But what the intellectual doesn't recognize, according to Hegel and this existentialist tradition, is that they have substituted one master for another. They think of themselves as free. Intellectuals think of themselves as, we're now rational. We're free of irrationalities. All bad things are caused by those crazy irrational people like I used to be. But now I'm a source of goodness because I've embraced reason and logic and all that. And what they don't understand is that now, instead of being lost in the world of experience, they're lost in the world of theory and ideas. Their training and education, their catechisms, their ideologies, their ideas rule them in the same way that a doulos is ruled by their experiences and feelings and appetites.
Right, right. And it's dissociation. But
Yeah,
so the Aristoi then is wise and does a synergistic thing or whatever you want to call the brain doing with both of those things. Um,
yes.
for what is that word? You something, but for the better of everything, is that what the Aristoi does then with those two? Because what would you say for the Aristoi regarding gnosis and noesis?
I just misspelled it in the chat, but yeah, basically the Aristos goes through the same kind of um yeah, we'll come to eudaimonia in a second. The
There we
Aristos
go.
goes through the same kind of dissatisfaction with noesis that the Banausos previously went through with gnosis.
Right,
Just like
right.
the Banausos came to see the limitations of having gnosis be your master,
Hmm.
the Aristos comes to realize that having noesis be your master isn't any joy either. You,
Hmm.
you can do terrible things when ideas are your master.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
so the Aristos is the person who says, God damn it, I'm not going to let either of these faculties in my brain suck me in. I'm not going to let myself be addicted to feelings and experiences and so on. But I'm also not going to let myself be addicted to my ideas and catechisms and ideologies and training. They're both dangerous addictions. They're both sources of information. In fact, between them, that's all the sources of information we have. So the Benausos has made a terrible mistake in cutting themselves off from gnosis, because that's why they can drift into the land of theories. They're untethered now from sights and sounds and appetites. But you want to have access to that information without having it rule you. And so what the Aristos does is they create a dialectic. They create a dialectic between their own gnosis and their own noesis, pitting them against each other. And every time
or having them relate to each other.
Well, exactly.
Do we have to pit them against each other?
You want to listen to both of them.
Yeah.
And then when you're trying to evaluate who's right,
Mm-hmm.
you use the other one to critique.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is critique your experiences and feelings, but also your feelings and experiences critique your ideas. So you say, well, this seems like a reasonable idea, but I just have a really bad feeling about this. It's like, yeah, I could dominate this guy, but then I would feel bad because he would feel bad, and I don't want him to feel bad. And so maybe I'm not going to do this domineering thing, even though I have the power to, and I could. Maybe I'll let my feelings back into the picture and realize that I'm not, in some abstract game where I'm trying to win. I'm actually supposed to be part of a community. And that means I can't just, beat other people and dominate them. Partially, this is one of the things the Nazis talked about is that there's this issue, even with their highly trained soldiers trained to execute, the Jews and the union organizers and everybody else they were killing. They had this problem with shell shock among their own soldiers, because even though they trained them to kill and to feel good about it, they had a high rate of nervous breakdowns, because there's something in us that would rather be part of a healthy community than be out slaughtering other people. And the Nazis never could figure out how to train people out of that. And that's why they came up with the gas chambers and other forms of mass execution, because they said it's wrecking our soldiers to have them disregard their human feelings. We tried to teach them to do it, and yet instead they're breaking. And that it really goes to the point that if we get too far into the ideas, if we do untether from our gnosis and our feelings and our experiences, it damages us. So the Aristos wants to create a dialectic, wants to create a dialogue between these two sources of information and try to evaluate, what does each of them have to say? And, if they both agree, that's fantastic. That's easy. But when they disagree, you don't let either of them win. You sort of stand back and compare and contrast and critique them and put it together. So the result is that for a doulos, their sense of identity is almost synonymous to their gnosis. Their immediacy, their feelings, their experiences is very close to who they are. They have the capacity for noesis, but they only ever use it as a prosthesis to assist their gnosis. The Benausos is doing the opposite. He's pushed his gnosis away. He doesn't want any part of it. And now he identifies with his brain. He says reason is the greatest of all things. Like Hegel, he may say God is reason. Reason is God. He becomes so hyper intellectualized that his own sense of the sacred and his sense of himself becomes bound up with one of these two faculties. And that's how he becomes. So the Aristos is the first. We're not saying there's no other stages of development. The Greeks just don't know about any others. But if there are more, the Aristos is the first stage of development at which a human being refuses to let their sense of identity be equated to one or the other of these two faculties. And they say, inside me, there is not one, the gnosis, which is what the doulos would say. There's not one, the noesis, which is what the Benausos would say. The Aristos is the first person who says there's three of us in here. There's my gnosis, there's my noesis, and then there's me. And we're going to have a conversation here, right?
And maybe more. Yeah, right.
There may be more, but there's at least three of us.
Yep. So when, and I understand too, one of the problems with the noetic stuckness is rationalizing. bad stuff. So, unhealthy stuff. So, the other question I had was about, I don't know history well enough to know how, when, where, and for how long, if so, has Aristoi really had a place in society? And I put the for how long in there too, because I'm sure that it's happened. We know this, but for how long, when, and where? Because maybe it's just an ebb and flow, of course, but um, I can't imagine that it was ever really wanted.
Well, it's what's interesting is that when our founding fathers say that they don't want a nation of men, they want a nation of laws, not men. They're basically saying that they blame the corruption of the late medieval period on human fallibility and human appetite and human ego and so forth. And so they say people are the problem, so people should not be in charge. And instead, we'll create a perfect machine of laws, and it will tell us all what to do. And the more laws we have, and the more we obey those laws, the less choice we will have about doing bad things. And the laws will force us to do good things until eventually we're all cogs in a big, perfectly moving machine. This was the goal to avoid the corruption of the medieval period, was to create this world in which there's no human agency involved. It's humans just perfectly align themselves with the laws that tell them what to do. So the modern world really set out deliberately to eliminate human governance and to try to make self-governing systems in which humans just move through their paces as programmed for them. In most of certainly all the human cultures that we know about prior to these kinds of innovations, in general, people always thought that human beings were supposed to be in charge, right? That laws serve people and are just a way of capturing or encoding what human beings want other people to do. One way that you see this in the medieval period is the concept of the divine right of kings. And the idea was that the ruler should rule not as a law, but as a person with good judgment. And that you want people with good judgment in charge, not people with bad judgment. So you have to discriminate among people and figure out who's got good judgment and bad judgment. But that under the medieval model, the belief was that God will figure that out for us and he will tell us through his agents which people have a good character and that you can trust them to judge you. And once you know who those people are, then you say, okay, you're the king. We all acknowledge you the king as chosen by divine right. So now tell us what to do. So it used to be that the way that people wanted it was they wanted a person to tell them what to do. And there's two other places where you can see this. One is if you think about craftsmanship and how you learn to be a carpenter or how you learn to be a stonemason or what have you. You begin as an apprentice and you apprentice yourself to a master. And you do that because the master's better at it than you are. If you want to learn how to do it better than you do now, you find somebody who's better at it than you are. And you say, please tell me what to do. Tell me how to learn, what are the steps in building this house? What are the steps in running these pipes under the city? How do I do it? So it was actually the norm for most of human civilization to want people in charge. You wanted people in charge who knew more than you knew and had better judgment than you had. Modernity is the first epoch in which we said nobody has better judgment than I do. Nobody knows more than I do. Everybody gets a say. We're all the same. There's no such thing as expertise. There's no such thing as people of good character. We're all the same, and we're going to put together some laws that will tell us all what to do. And that way we don't have to trust another human being. We'll just trust the law. So from our perspective, we have been immersed in this big machine for so long. It's astonishing to us that for most of human existence, people wouldn't have wanted to be in a big legal machine or a big economic machine or what have
But
you.
yeah, but if we're going to delineate, banal soy, dual, whatever, the lowest, whatever. If we're going to delineate the three categories, I'm still looking at there were periods of time where we were fortunate to have an Aristoi's capability to take care of things. But I don't know how often that could have happened.
None
And
of
for
us
how
really
long.
knows. None of
Yeah.
us really knows. And it's confused by the fact that, for every king who may have actually had better character and been a good person to be in charge, God knows how many other kings had terrible character and really shouldn't
Right.
have been in charge, but they had, they had the swords,
Yeah,
right?
and then
So
the swords will really come after, whoever. They're going to come after whoever because that's what they do. And that's why, for how long did an Aristoi get to rule? How long would they I think that's an anomaly. I would think that that was an exception, but didn't happen so often. That's what I think.
it's hard to tell from our perspective because we've all been acculturated into the system that doesn't allow any Aristoi at all. So for us, this seems normal because
Well, I don't
this is the
know.
water we're in.
Is that I don't feel that way. I'm, you know, in my seventh decade here, and I feel like I have experienced some of that. I mean, we're coming into the more mechanized, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, but my trajectory has experienced some of that. So, and I went to, parochial school. That might have had something to do with why I experienced some, Aristoi, maybe,
Sure.
'cause there was some of that there. I don't know.
You can also see it. Well, think about when you're trying to hire somebody to fix a broken toilet. You really want to find the best person, don't you? I mean, you
Mhm.
don't just
Yes.
say, I want some bully to come in here and do whatever he wants to my toilet. You try to say who could actually get the job done,
Mhm.
and it's a normal human response.
Right.
Want somebody who's good at what they do.
Safety. I mean, it'll procure safety that we
Yeah,
want the Aristoi.
yeah.
Right. But that doesn't happen often.
Well, it doesn't happen often now.
I can't imagine. That's why I asked about history. That's why I was saying, does anybody here know enough history to know how often that happened?
It's a tough question to answer. Aristotle thought that a third of the Athenian population were Aristoi.
Hmm.
And he could have been wrong, but he was there and we weren't. He thought a third of the population were Douloi, a third were Banausoi, and a third were Aristoi, roughly.
Hmm. Hmm.
He says other Greek city states were different. He says in Sparta there were hardly any Aristoi, and mostly Douloi. But you know, even the Spartan numbers would be better than what we have now, where there basically aren't any Aristoi.
Hmm.
There's no role for Aristoi now. Um, it's interesting. So what we're talking about here is a model, and we don't know the extent to which it applies to any given situation. But what we do mean, we do have to recognize that if the modern world has been going on for roughly 500 years, give or take, then we and our parents and our grandparents and our great grandparents and our great 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 grand, as far back as we can go for many generations, have all been living in this system in which Aristoi are the exception. So naturally, it seems normal to us that people wouldn't want Aristoi around. But certainly, you can also at least conceive of the idea that people might have wanted the best person for the job, whatever the job was. And if the job was figuring out what we're supposed to do next, you maybe there were times when it was natural for people to just try to find whoever would be most effective at it. Anyway, I won't be able to fully answer the question. It's we're
There's a
just
lot of,
we're just walking through what the model is and trying to sort out
yeah.
uh, kind of what is the model that's being described.
That's a lot of food for thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Great questions. Hey, Phineas, come off mute and tell us what's on your mind.
Hi, how's it going? Um, so at first when you were saying there were no Aristoi, that's because I thought it was like by definition almost unattainable. Like it was like an idealized state that Aristotle was trying to lead people towards, but it wasn't really like achieved at this point. But then now I'm recognizing like a third of people in Athens were considered to be Aristoi. So then now I'm questioning how there could be no Aristoi at this point. Like if a third of the people in Athens were Aristoi, I would think that there would be still a substantial number, even if it's like a lower proportion of the population. And what do you think we're missing at this point to prevent that?
It's a great question, Phineas. That's what this whole paper is about. Human nature's Greek characterological anthropology that we're going to be walking through here. He's talking about what the Greeks thought all of these character types were, how they work together, and he's going to talk about why he thinks they're missing today. But he says it's not just something that's missing, but rather that the modern world, in past times, people understood that laws were something you put together to serve the community. And if the laws weren't working, you changed the laws. The point of the law was to keep the peace and allow us to live together. But in the modern world, laws don't have a purpose per se. The laws are their own purpose. They exist because they're the law. And the rest of us all serve the law. We're supposed to comply with them, period. And granted, we've created processes to change the law, to adjust it or modify it over time. But why we change the law and what we're trying to do with that is not near as clear today as it used to be. I mean, like a lot, first, for one thing, there were societies, and the Isle of Man is one and Iceland is another, where for many centuries, you were not allowed to have more laws than you could remember, which to us is inconceivable. But part of the way that you know that is once a year, whoever was the current lawgiver would gather together the whole island, or, a big field, and he'd stand on a little hill in the middle of the field, and he would have to recite from memory the entirety of the law. And if he couldn't do that, you had too many laws. And the purpose, so you had to be very careful about which laws you passed. And, if you needed a new law, then maybe you had to adjust some of your existing laws to keep the burden low enough that everybody could learn all of the law. And to this day, there are similar functions on the Isle of Man and in Iceland. They're not able to do it like they used to, but they still have the tradition of you got to come out and recite the law, and everybody's going to decide whether they like it or not. In the Isle of Man during the Middle Ages, if the law reciter came out and recited the law and it included some terrible law that nobody agreed with, they'd tell him to, make it not be a law. And if he wouldn't, they'd kill him and replace him. So, the lawgivers were incredibly accountable to their population in a way that would be inconceivable today. I mean, you're not going to see the president of the United States go stand out in the middle of a crowd and say, here's all the ways in which we're screwing you this year. How do you feel about that? This is, we've inverted the relationship. The law governs us now, supposedly. It at least rules us in a way that it didn't before. And what that means is that previous civilizations wanted and expected that there would be people whose job was to critique and change the law, sometimes on the fly. Was it, Donald, remind me, was it Athens that brought in a tyrant for a while because Athens decided their law code was too messed up and they needed someone to just come in and fix it? And so they got some tyrant to come in and give them a new constitution, completely redo the thing.
I don't know. The Pisistratus family.
That's it.
Ruled off and on for a while, and then up until I think Solon. Then
yes.
The end.
Yes.
I'm off the top of my head. Don't trust me.
Okay, thanks, Donald. Yeah, I mean, it's something that used to happen from time to time, is people would say, wow, this system is screwed up. Let's chuck it and start over. And it wouldn't require, the French Revolution with chopping off half the heads in the country to do it. People could just decide this isn't working for us. Let's do it again. And they wanted people who specialized in the law to get in there and fix it for them, the Constitution, the laws, what have you. But now, can you imagine the United States allowing people to get together and say, okay, let's chuck the law and start over? I mean, people suggesting that would be treated as terrorists. You're not allowed to do that. You're supposed to work within the system. And that means to make sure you could change very little. And if you do change it, you're going to have the backing of a lot of people pouring a lot of money, probably dark money into your back pocket to allow you to win all the elections and, buy all of the votes that you have to buy in order to get the changes that need to happen. I mean, our system is Byzantine, when it comes to trying to leash the law or discipline the law to make it serve people. So in a system like this, the idea of people who specialize, not lawyers, but people who specialize in taming the law and making it serve people is anathema. That's borderline terrorist stuff. That's how you end up in jail or shot. Don't you dare mess with this thing. We have so much money at stake in every single law that's on the books. There's all kinds of billions of dollars are flowing through the system, depending on it to be the way that it is, and you're not allowed to mess with it, by and large. So what would someone use an Aristos for? So society basically punishes what it used to reward, and people who look at this and say, "Man, this is unjust. These laws are leading us off a cliff. We need to fix this and change it. We need to get all this corruption out. We need to get all this bribery and money out of the system. We need to," you start looking at the problems and saying, well, why don't we just fix this stuff? And there's an immediate pushback. And it's if you push harder, then it's violent. And that's the end of you. And so as a result, there's no role for Aristoi. And it's not a mistake that new generations of people grow up in the United States feeling powerless. Like this isn't our country. This is the country I was born into, but I didn't make it in any way. I was not allowed to make it or shape it or construct it. And if I enter government, if I, start running for office and I'm going to find that I spend all my time raising money and giving speeches and doing everything except governing. Because that's how the system wants it. That's how you prevent any significant change from happening. Geneva, come off mute and tell us what's on your mind.
Oh, yeah, this is an interesting conversation. And I'm just wondering, you just said it was the way it used to be, the Aristoi, and now it's not. So I'm wondering if, per Hegel's evolutionary process, if this is something that we might be moving towards again, or is it just, do you think, just gone, never to return?
What a great question.
Yeah.
So the short answer is nobody knows. Right? I mean, we don't know where this is going. We have all kinds of models and theories, but for every 100 models, at least 99 of them are disproven pretty quickly.
It's like a pendulum, like the pendulum's over here, but it typically moves back the other direction slowly, but I think in time the pendulum usually swings back.
Yes. Well, societies that don't meet the needs of their citizens don't last all that long. It's a fundamental thing that our character needs to express itself. We got to eat enough food and breathe enough clean air and drink enough clean water and got to have a house over our heads. As a society gets to a point where it fails to meet these needs because it's so busy following its laws and processes, churning out, return on investment for shareholders rather than getting people houses, then what happens is you get a growing body of people who've been discarded and they are angry about being discarded. And sooner or later, the society changes. I've been reading a lot of Hannah Arendt lately, where she talks about, what led to Nazi Germany. And she says, part of where left-wing people and right-wing people both get the analysis wrong is that one of the major powers or sources of political power within the Nazi movement was what on the left they call the lumpen proletariat, the failures, the people who've been thrown away by the economy. So those are the people the Nazis reached out to join the Nazi party. How would you like to not be thrown away anymore? I bet you got a lot of anger about being thrown out and treated like a worthless person. Would you like to join our party and stick it to all those people who used to look down their noses at you? This was how they used to recruit. right? And these kinds of recruiting factions, methodologies happen today as well with modern factions. A society that generates, this is one of Hannah Arendt's core points, a society that generates a large number of thrown away people is a society that will soon be thrown away. Because people don't want to be thrown away. Their character is crying out to express itself to be what feels right to them. And being thrown out doesn't, for evolutionary reasons, not one of us feels right about being thrown out. That's not why we evolved. So we push back. Donald, come off mute and tell us what's on your mind.
Well, I think a lot of we somewhat see this as a ladder, but I'm not sure. Of the classes, somebody's on top, but I think the big skill that gets acquired is the ability to rule oneself, self-rule. We had a long time about sophrosyne, and the level at which you can exercise that may be the defining characteristic that set Aristos can do more than just rule himself. He can actually help guide other people's lives, and therefore he or she becomes suitable for guiding a city or guiding a country, to get better at self-rule. The other, I wanted to talk about just some stupid little stories. Like I had my bathroom remodeled, it was a year ago, and they had particular trouble hanging a door. A lot of the trim carpentry, they just seemingly didn't, it never hung right. And I talked to the owner of the company and the all that. And it's like, I shouldn't have to tell the carpenter that it's not right. The carpenter should be able to look at his own work and realize it's not good work. That is, even if that's kind of dualic or banausic behavior, they should still have some ability to judge the quality of their own work. And I think about, like, as a programmer, there reached a point where I knew whether my code was right or not. Other people could review it, and they always did, but I knew whether it was right. And I was good then also at reviewing other people's code. The same thing, I was, as a math student, there reached a point, I'm not very good at calculating. I was in math theory. All I did was prove theorems. But I knew when my theorems were right. Yes, they would get checked and graded, but some people would write down things and they had no clue as to whether they proved anything or not. They couldn't tell. And I saw this as sort of a lacking of self-rule, the ability in that sense to judge one's own behavior and whether it met the standards required. And then I had this crazy image of a young Kenneth Smith, a teenager, going to the philosophy department at the University of Texas and lecturing the faculty on how they were delusional rather than existential, and how this merged with young Jesus going to the temple to lecture the priest on the law. but that all is just delusion on my part. But it is this idea that you get if you have some little part of your life or some area where you reach almost an heuristic standard that you can judge the quality, the correctness, your own part. And God, no, we want, in a sense, heuristic plumbers and heuristic carpenters and heuristic electricians. We want them to know that they got it right, that we don't need to come behind them and say, this isn't acceptable. This is not right. And it's that character change, that ability to rule oneself, even if not completely, not, I may can get the plumbing right, but I may not be able to get the duties of citizenship in a city right or in a nation right. But we can see little glimmers all around sometimes if we look. Maybe there's somebody that you work with or something that just understands some little part of life so well that they get it right and set a standard enough.
Thanks, Donald. Well, why don't we go to the text? So we finished the introductory sections last time. Well, I was going to talk about eudaimonia. Yes, thank you, David. Eudaimonia. So, all right, we won't go to the text. We'll go to eudaimonia. Kenneth Smith, he is like Hegel, is a student of the philosopher Heraclitus of Ephesus, and Heraclitus of Ephesus has this saying, ethos anthropos daimon, and ethos anthropos daimon is typically translated as character is fate. We've all heard this phrase, character is fate, and what he means by character is fate is that not that what your character is determines the outcome, but that what your character is determines your teleology. It's what you as an organism are going to be striving towards. And maybe you're going to be blown off course by a typhoon, or there's going to be a wall in the way, or who knows. But given the opportunity, your character is driving you in certain directions. It's trying, in the same way an acorn is trying to become an oak, your character is trying to take you certain places. And this is why the Oracle at Delphi says, know thyself. Because they mean know your character, figure out what is inside of you. What is your nature? What is it that's trying to express itself? And what are you going to do about that? And when they say character is fate, they mean not that you are always doomed in this direction, but that as your character now stands, that's where you're pointing. You're an arrow, and that's the way you're pointing. And if you don't like pointing in that direction, you need to change your character. And you can't change your character magically, like poof, you have a different character. There's no character transplant. But it's like a garden. You can weed it. you can water it and cultivate it and try to get it to grow in a better direction. And if you do that work, you will change the direction of the arrow and your fate. Thus you've changed your fate by changing your character. So more specifically, ethos anthropoi daimon actually translates as ethos, character, is a person's anthropos. It's their daimon. And the daimon is like a kind of god to the Greeks in their polytheistic religion. Just like there's gods of the trees, just like there's gods of the ocean, just like there's gods of war. There's little gods of little things, like the god of this creek or this fountain. And the Greeks thought your own character rules over you, has the same kind of authority over you and the direction that you're heading that a god of the stream has over that stream, or that Poseidon has over the ocean, or what have you. And that what's important about this to the Greeks is, for them, the gods were not above nature. They represented aspects of nature, parts of nature that human beings would do well to pay attention to. The things that if you ignore them at your peril. people will get in trouble if they don't if they don't take care of these things. And so each deity is a kind of caution. It's a thing to watch, to learn about, and to anticipate. And so ultimately, ethos anthropoi daimon is saying your character is so authoritative over the course of your life that you ignore it at your peril. This is another way of saying know thyself. It's saying you ignore what's going on inside you at your peril. It's fine to pay attention to what's around you. You have to learn a lot of things. It's a big, complicated world, but you also have to pay attention to the nature within you, and you have to take responsibility for it and cultivate it. Because if you don't, nobody else will. Or like David says in the chat, if you don't change your direction, you're going to end up where you're headed. You're right. If you don't change your character, then to the best of your character's ability to manifest itself, you're going to end up where it's pointing. And if you don't like that direction, you have nobody but yourself to blame for not altering it. Now, it's not to say you're responsible for the end conditions. The outside world has all these big influences. But, when you catch a break, which way are you pushing? You want it to be in a healthy direction and not an unhealthy direction. And all of this, Geneva asks about this. This is ultimately these are all ramifications of Heraclitus's comment, ethos anthropoi daimon. And you could write an entire book. You could write several books just trying to explicate what these three words meant to the ancient Greeks. It's a complex subject. So daimon, eudaimonia and dysdaimonia are ways of talking about what your character is like. And eudaimonia is the condition of having a character, to be blessed by having a character that points you in very healthy directions. You just want to do the right thing. It just feels good. Yet that's what you want to do. That's eudaimonia. Dysdaimonia is having a character that just wants to do the wrong things. Just the wrong things just feel right. And I can speak to this as a I'm from a whole family of alcoholics. I don't drink. I can't drink. I don't dare drink. So all the adult members of my family on multiple generations, on all the branches, have spent, years of their lives and sometimes their entire life in the bottle. I mean, we're not talking about people who drink a little too much. We're talking about my great grandma Pat, getting drunk and falling down in the gutter downtown Seattle and lying there waiting for people to get her. She just always drank herself into a stupor. That's my genes. If I pick up a bottle, that's where my character's pointing me, right into the bottle and nowhere else. I'm surrounded by people who can drink just fine and not have a problem, but I'm not one of them. That's my character. That's the direction I'm headed. So what do I do about that? Well, first, gnothe se out, and know thyself. Know that this is what's in me. Second of all, ethos anthropoi daimon, recognize that what's in me is pointing in a direction. And if I don't like that direction, I should change my character. When it comes to alcohol, I have dysdaimonia. But over time, because of the experiences I've had in my life, when it comes to honesty and lying, I have eudaimonia. I'm really attached to the truth. It's why I do these things that we do. It's why we have these conversations. It's why I try to explain these things and try to understand these things is I have an appetite for the truth. And I'm lucky in that, in the same way that I'm unlucky in the part of my character that wants the bottle. So eudaimonia and dysdaimonia. And the idea is to become an Aristos, among the many things that you have to do is you have to cultivate, you have to take responsibility for your own character, find the issues in it that are dysdaimonic, and cultivate them in a healthier direction. Figure out what you're going to do about them. The modern equivalent is we say you have to own your own bullshit. People who do not want to own their own bullshit should not be in governance, right? They're just going to use the power to have their appetites and ideologies all over the damn place. And Aristos is somebody who has committed to owning their own bullshit. And as such, they have at least done some of the cultivation in the direction away from dysdaimonia and towards eudaimonia. And maybe anybody could do this with the right training and experiences. Maybe not. We don't know. But it's like with music. Maybe anybody could learn to compose music. Maybe only some people could do it. We don't know. And we're never in a position where we have actually tried teaching music to every person alive to find out if everybody's got the potential. But at least a lot of people have the potential if you give them a chance, if they have music school and so on. Donald likes to talk on these calls about, what Kenneth used to say is that where you get Aristoi from is you get people who are interested in developing in an aristic direction. They have to go find an existing Aristos and follow him around. Find out what he does. Find out what he says. Find out how he thinks about problems and solves problems. You learn. It's the same way you learn how to be a good carpenter or a great musician. You find somebody who's good at it. And that's the challenge, going back to Phineas's question. The thing that we're missing today is we're missing conspicuous public Aristoi, who the rest of us can follow around and learn from. And without the example to teach us, how the hell are we ever supposed to be good at this? There's nobody to model ourselves on. So we're dug down pretty deep in a pit when it comes to trying to produce Aristoi. So anyway, thank you for the reminder, David. Ari, come off mute and tell us what's on your mind.
Yeah, I want to ask a question about essentially the way you phrased, not really phrased, but explained I can't pronounce it, sorry. That let's say your example of the truth, you're the type of person who cares about the truth, so you cultivate aspects of your life that chase after or protect or whatever, are interested in the truth. And to me, that sounds like, there's an element of one's character that does this, but let's say maybe you've got the other part of your character that's, could get dangerously attached to the bottle, which would be dysdaimonia, right? So I'm hearing this sounds a lot like sophorsune, but it sounds like eudaimonia is maybe an element of having agency, while sophorsune for like either at least for animals with their sophorsune, that's purely contingency. Like the cheetah is not, like learning, going to school. I mean, maybe it is like what they do with being in the rest of their cheetahs, but they're not like, they're not like making a choice like, oh, I want to learn how to go after the gazelle, or I want to learn how to swim like a shark, right? They're not doing that, right? They're just is sophorsune like sort of automatic? And this is the idea that humans don't have this automatic instinctiveness, and therefore our plasticity means we have to cultivate eudaimonia. But I was also thinking the way you're describing it is that eudaimonia sounds like an ingredient, and then sophorsune might be the recipe. Because if you have eudaimonia for like 10 things, but you have dysdaimonia for like alcohol, then that one thing is going to ruin all the rest. And so I was thinking a lot of this is like this, like a lot of great people have these great characteristics, but then they do something that, just messes it all up. It's like if you build a building and you have all the things going right, but like you miss one cornerstone, and that cornerstone is the base of the foundation, the whole thing falls over. Like, so in this case, that's not sophorsune. Maybe there's a bunch of eudaimonia there, but because it's not a package. So anyways, this is also model, and I don't want to get stuck in modeling too much, but I'm just trying to relate these ideas that at its core, it sounds like eudaimonia is a lot like sophorsune, but at the same time not. So I'm not sure if we're willing to discuss that.
Sure, let's talk about sophorsune. So sophorsune, I put it in the chat, is a quality that modern English translations of ancient Greek translate this word very badly. We don't have the concept. So, but we can see that the Greeks think it's just, the best thing since sliced bread. So we know it's something important and valuable and precious to them. So we translate it as sort of whatever we think is important. You can find translations of the Greek that translate it as practical intelligence, which is more or less the opposite of sophorsune. So it's a problem for us. We had some discussions about it before, and that's why Ari's referring to it. Sophorsune, in short, is a compass in the brain that every living organism except Homo sapiens has. They have it and we don't. So, well, I'll talk about how it relates to temperance after I get the main idea across. But the sophorsune is something they have because their instincts make them grow up to have a certain kind of culture. Cheetahs all over the world have the same cheetah culture. They live the same kind of life. with the same kinds of interests, the same kinds of focus, the same kinds of special skills and excellences they each need to develop, whether they live in the Sahara or in India or, on the Serengeti. It doesn't matter where they are, that the same interests they have to be interested in keeping themselves clean so that you can't smell them from a mile away. They have to be interested in learning how to stalk through the grass, how to be sneaky, how to watch things. They have to learn how to judge whether they're close enough, and they have to learn how to run like the wind, right? They have some other things too, but these are some of their core things that they're interested in doing that are distinctive to cheetahs, and they all want to do it. And the reason they all want to do it is they have instincts that make them want to do it, that make them notice those things, that make them care about those things. Because they have all of those instincts, their character acts like an arrow, like a compass needle, and it points to the true north for that species. And for cheetahs, the true north is if you develop these skills and you live the life that those skills make possible, then you will survive and you will reproduce, but also your prey species will survive and reproduce. In fact, the whole Serengeti ecosystem will survive and reproduce and do well. So Sofrosune is when the character of the organism has evolved to the point where it naturally wants to and takes an interest in living a life that not coincidentally harmonizes with the overall ecosystem. Successful for them as an individual, successful for them as a species, successful for the entire ecosystem they're a part of. That's Sofrosune. And the reason they have it and we don't is that we're the only animal that doesn't grow up to have a single culture that's the same all over the world. Every other animal grows up to live a certain kind of life, but we don't. This was the great trick that evolution played on us. It said, you get to grow up to be many different things. There could be different kinds of people. There could be reindeer herders. There could be fishermen. There could be corn farmers in the American Southwest. There could be all these different ways of life. Whereas for every other animal, there's one way of life for that animal. But for us, there could be a whole bunch of ways of life. But and you can see the immediate evolutionary advantage to a species that's able to adopt wildly different ways of life in wildly different parts of the planet. It meant we could spread over the planet. But there's a price to be paid for that. And the price to be paid is you cannot have a compass in the brain that points you towards only one way of life if you're supposed to be able to live lots of different ways of life. So the only way we could be made flexible enough was to take away our certainty. That compass in the brain is gone for us. All the instincts that would point us to exactly one right way that all people are supposed to live, I don't know how far back in our ancestors that went away, but it went away. It's gone. So we're the uncertain animal. We have a lot of existential anxiety and uncertainty that you would never see in a cheetah. Never. You won't see it in a salmon. When it's time for the salmon to swim home to the stream, it's astonishing the single-mindedness with which it traverses the ocean and finds the right stream and goes up it and sacrifices its life to reproduce. I mean, it knows what to do. Its instincts guide it to want to do that one thing, but there is no one right thing for us to want to do. So evolution got rid of our Sofrosune. And in its place, it gave us three other things. The first is it gave us culture. We're the most cultural animal. So different cultures can acculturate their children to grow up to become different kinds of people that live different kinds of lives. Culture. And the second thing it gave us is enthusiasms. We're the enthusiastic animal. And whether what we're enthusiastic about is collecting old farm equipment or playing, motets on the piano or painting pictures or eating delicious meals that we just cooked, we're each capable of enthusiasms. They could be about anything. Unlike Sofrosune, there's no way to know what one given Homo sapiens versus another is going to be enthusiastic about. It gives us that drive that Sofrosune gives to every other animal. But it doesn't guarantee that this enthusiasm makes any goddamn sense. Right? I mean, we've all, not only have we seen other people who are enthusiastic about crazy stuff, we have been that person, right? Each of us at one time or another has been enthusiastic about something we really probably shouldn't have been enthusiastic about. But we didn't know any better, right? Our tendency to enthusiasm is part of evolution's replacement for the missing sophrosune. And the third and last thing is it gave us intuition. Now, unlike instinct, intuition is learned. We learn from our experience to have instincts, but they're not real instincts, to have notions and feelings that kind of nudge us one way away from bad things and towards good things. We hope. If our intuition has been developed in a healthy way in us, then it will nudge us away from the serial killer and towards the potential good friend, who will have our back. And that would be eudaimonia. If our intuition nudges us the right directions, if our enthusiasms make us enthusiastic about the right things, if we have been acculturated to live a healthy possible life, then we have eudaimonia. But if instead we have been badly acculturated, for example, if we've been acculturated to be consumers and producers and fans and voters, but not to actually create our world together, if we have been given enthusiasms for spending lots of money and racking up credit card debt and gambling, if we have been given intuition to trust the con artist who's going to, take everything we own and get in bad relationships, then we have dysdaimonia instead of eudaimonia. Our character, we have a monkey on our back instead of a god or goddess guiding us. Our daimon, instead of being a beautiful person who's guiding us to beautiful things, they're leading us in the wrong direction. So yeah. So Ari's asking about the relationship between sophrosune and eudaimonia, and this is the relationship. Because we don't have sophrosune, we have these other factors that we have evolved to have. So a baby is born and could become many different kinds of animals when they grow up. What kind of life are they going to live? There could be a whole range of them. But in the course of growing up is the process of shedding most of those possibilities. They atrophy away as we don't develop them. And instead we sort of zero in on a smaller number of things that we actually are pretty good at. And about those things, we develop enthusiasms and intuitions because we've been acculturated. And once we grow up enough that we can adjust our own character and train ourselves and teach ourselves, we start self-culturing, self-acculturating to become like Sharon did not become an anesthesiologist just because her parents made her do it, right? I mean, there was a point in her education when she decided consciously that she wanted to live the life of an anesthesiologist, and she made herself go through the training and the practice, and she thought about her job, she thought about right and wrong in that job and what she should do and what she should not do, and she molded her character over time to become the character of the kind of animal that could be great at anesthesiology. Just like Donald molded his character over time to become the kind of animal that could be great at programming. And that's why Sharon and Donald have different intuitions and different enthusiasms, is because their process of acculturation pushed them in different directions, right? We are many animals in one in a way that most animals are not. And that's why we don't have sophrosune. So I don't know if that answers your question, Ari, but that's kind of how eudaimonia and dysdaimonia relate to sophrosune. We are more dependent on our character and its acculturation than other animals are, because they are born with a bunch of their character built in through sophrosune, and we have to get that stuff through culture. And if we don't get a good culture, we're screwed.
Thanks, Rick. That was helpful.
So, okay, let's go to the text. We've still got some time. Let's go to the text. This is the beginning of the middle section. I pushed up the PDF earlier. First paragraph of the section that reads Greek. Is it Greek characterological anthropology? I think that's what this section is called. There it is. Greek philosophical anthropology. That's it. Greek philosophical anthropology. Paragraph 1. As Nietzsche grasped, modern culture, covertly bound by Christian and rationalist axiomatics, presumes human nature to have a universal or uniform structure. We refer perfunctorily to all humans equally as individuals or persons, as if this facile abstraction or undifferentiation were empirically evidential or rationally apodictic, or even had a substantive import. Can anyone fail to qualify as individual or person? Blithely, insipidly, this egalitarianism or universalism posits principles in personality, soul, rational will, conscience, ego cogito, etc., as homogeneous or uninflected as carbon or hydrogen is in chemistry. Is it so? Or are some richer in conscience, poorer in will, ampler in soul, weaker in ego, etc., than others, just as common sense is wont to say? Does will or rationality mean the same thing in actual application, in one case as in another? So he's talking here about the way that in the modern world, very different from the ancient world, we assert that we're all the same and that we're all equally individuals. But in the ancient world, they believed the opposite. They said, well, of course, everybody's different. I mean, who knows what somebody's going to develop into? We're the animal that could become many animals. And we each have our own character, and some of us are more or less likely to become musicians than others. I have a friend I like a great deal. I've known them, most of my life, and they're completely tone deaf. They enjoy music, they like to listen to it, but they're never going to be a great musician because they can't hear the difference between tones very clearly. They can't reproduce, they can't make a tone and hear in their ear whether it's the right tone or not. So no one's going to love them as their favorite singer, right? I mean, there may be tone deaf people on this call, and I'm not throwing shade at anybody, but I'm just saying if you want to be a great musician, you can't be tone deaf. Just like you can't. It's hard to be a great artist if you're colorblind. It's not impossible, but it's hard. There are certain parts of your character that you're born with. And these are, characteristics, and those things, or like my genetic alcoholism. And when you're born with that stuff, you got to work. If you can acknowledge you have it in you, then you have to work around it. You have to say, well, the life of a sommelier is not for me. I am never going to be a champion wine taster. I probably shouldn't even grow wine, and bottle it. There's whole ranges of human experience that I should pretty much just fence off and say, I'm never going to be great at that. That's not my thing. And we all know this is obviously true about each other. Everybody on this call has different skills and different capabilities, different strengths and weaknesses. But get us talking about modern politics, and somehow our eyes close and we recite the catechism. Oh, we're all equal. Equality is good. Well, if equality is good, what is the one set of skills we're all going to have? And then all the other skills not one of us has. I mean, right? It's as Ari points out, you can be colorblind and be a great artist, but you have to do it a certain way, don't you? In order to pull it off, you have to compensate. So this is what he's talking about. He say, we sort of have this catechism that say we're all equal and it's good to be equal. We should all be identical. That's how things should be. And it's a problem because nature isn't producing people the same way. It's producing a diversity of people. Different kinds of people have different characteristics, and that makes them good at different things and bad at different things. And that's good for culture because it takes a lot of different skills and capabilities to make a civilization, doesn't it? If we all were only good at the same one thing, we couldn't make a civilization. We'd be able to make a business. We all want to do plumbing. That's what we're all good at. We're going to produce 8 billion plumbers and not a single farmer. We got a problem as a species if we're all the same. So saying to the Greeks, that was fine. Of course we're different. Of course. And the differences are part of what make us individuals. And another part of what makes us individuals, according to the Greeks, is have we figured out who we are? Have we taken responsibility for our character? Did we ever decide to own our own bullshit and say, wow, I have anger management problems. Maybe when I get angry, I have to learn not to open my mouth. They have to learn to take a step back and not just emit whatever immediately comes to mind. And another person who doesn't have anger management problems, maybe they can say whatever comes to their mind. But I have to learn to control myself in this area because I have this issue. When you learn what your bullshit is and you decide to take responsibility for it, you start to cultivate yourself into a specific person. You start to become something more than just a symptom of however you were born. You are a co-creator of yourself. And to the Greeks, that's the beginning of becoming an individual. You're an individual because you're not just being generic, right? So this is what he's alluding to here in paragraph 16 when he talks about this. He's saying Nietzsche talks about that. Nietzsche sees that it's, the idea of a universal brotherhood of man, which, we've been talking about the medieval worldview and how this is part of what Jesus is postulating, the kingdom of God as an alternative to the rule by the Caesar. That kingdom of God could be founded in two completely different ways. It could be founded on we're all equal, we're all identical, and that's why we will allow one another to be treated as brothers and sisters. In which case, the first time we come across somebody who's different, we're going to commit genocide or behave in a bigoted fashion. Or we can take the kingdom of God that says it's okay that we're different. We're still brothers and sisters. We can have a diversity and still form a unity together, right? That's possible. And the problem for us coming out of European history is that even though there were plenty of mystics and monks and nuns and other free thinkers who were trying to be true to Jesus's message, who tried to go the second route and say, yes, there's a diversity of Jesus. He hangs out with all these people who society says you shouldn't hang out with. So he clearly believes that there should be a diversity of human beings and that you can still all be brothers and sisters together and create the kingdom of God and replace all these corrupt political systems. Nevertheless, the dominant form of politics in the Middle Ages went the other way. The power structures became about orthodoxy. Are you or are you not hewing to the official line about what Christianity is and is not? And if you're not, then we'll have a crusade. We'll come and we'll get rid of you, like the Albigensians in southern France discovered. There was genocide was baked and genocide is sort of a monomania or there can be only one right way is baked into 1,000 years of medieval history, as we've been talking about. And so Nietzsche's critique is that has built into us an appetite for I'm right and all of you are wrong. And the only way we can survive together is if you all either convert or die. There's the flame wars on the internet can trace themselves directly to this 1,000 years of practice in trying to create a monoculture, believing in our instinctual, intuitive level, being mistrained to think that the only way we can have peace on earth is if we're all the same thing. Even Hegel falls prey to this. I mean, he just flat out says the only way that people will ever be free is once we're all Christian. He thinks German Lutheranism is as good as it gets, and it is the solution for everyone. There shouldn't be any Buddhism. There shouldn't be any Islam or any Jews or anything. He thinks only, and furthermore, he doesn't even think there should be Catholics. Only Lutherans to the far ends of the earth, and then we'll all be free. When we're not free to believe whatever we believe, when we all believe exactly what he wants us to believe, then we'll be free. And he says it flat out, and he argues it at great length. And he's passionate about it. There's times when Hegel will inspire you, and there's times when Hegel will exasperate you. And in this part, we see the exasperating Hegel, who is the heir to the medieval idea that if there is diversity, then there must be genocide to remove it. Only a monoculture will do. And so this is what he's meaning in this opening sentence Kenneth is talking about. We have that Nietzsche has critiqued modernity as having inherited this appetite for monocultures. We presume that there is a universal human nature. We're all the same, or at least we'd better be. And that, as a student of the Greeks, Nietzsche was very clear that the Greeks did not believe that there was a single human nature. The Greeks thought there were at least 3 species of character, and that was a good thing. And part of what Nietzsche is arguing here is that there are all these other people teaching Greek and studying the classics at the same time he is, and they have failed to notice what he has noticed. They just assumed the Greeks would be like us and be genocidal and want a monoculture. But he's seeing that the Greeks pretty much just say flat out that they want diversity. One of the things that we note on these calls sometimes is that as hard as it is for us to imagine after 2,000 years of European history, the Greeks never once fought a war over religion. Not a single time. They fought all the goddamn time. They loved fighting. Nietzsche has whole essays about how much the Greeks loved to fight. And they didn't just love the winning. They also loved, cutting each other open and, entrails on the ground and people screaming. That speech from the first Conan movie, when they say, "What is good in life?" And Conan says, "To drive your enemies before you." They hear the lamentations of the women. Nietzsche says that's what the Greeks said they liked. They loved it. I mean, Ares was a god, and Ares was the god of the nasty side of war, not Athena, the elegant, aristic excellence in battle and wisdom. No, Ares is there, and he's all about slaughter and destruction and all that. Ginny, do you want to come off mute and tell us what's on your mind? I see your hands up.
Oh, stop that, Cheverick. I've always had such an idealistic notion of ancient Greeks. What are you doing? What are you doing? I have no, oh my God, entrails. Oh my God. Rick, what are you doing to me? Oh no.
I know.
Oh
Kenneth
my
says
God.
there's a difference between studying the Greeks and being a Hellenophile. Nietzsche says, study the Greeks, learn from the Greeks, but it also means learn from the awful parts of the Greeks. They were a warrior culture. They conquered the peninsula they were in. Their ancestors, killed a lot of people and enslaved a lot of people. They choppy with the sword. They were big on that. So they love to fight wars, but so you would think, well, then of course they must have fought over religion because we think that's human nature because that's all we've ever seen for 2,000 years. And yet, that's not what the Greeks did. When they encountered other religions, their response wasn't, "Oh, dear God, we have to eliminate it." Their response was, "Oh no, what if you've discovered a God we're missing? We need to sit down with your religious people and ask you about your gods. And if you've got a God we don't have, we have to add them to our pantheon." Because what's a god to the Greeks? It's some part of nature that's authoritative over you. And if you pay attention to it, maybe it won't step on you. But if you don't pay attention to it, you're just going to be blindsided over and over and never know why things go wrong. The Greeks were always like, if you've got a god we don't have, maybe that explains why, our bunch of failures we've had in the past. Maybe we were ignoring some part of nature we should have been paying attention to. So even the Romans, conquer speak about choppy chop, right? The Romans are spreading all over the place, slaughtering and killing and conquering, and still they're spending money to set up temples to the native people's gods. I just conquered you, and yet I'm building a temple to your gods? Why am I doing that? From our perspective, it's inconceivable. And the answer was it was just not part of the ancient world to commit genocide on a religious basis. They'd kill for plenty of other reasons, but religion, why would you kill over religion? It doesn't make sense. So this idea that human nature demands or naturally wants to eliminate diversity is refuted. It's something we've been taught to do. Bad intuition in us through 2,000 years of acculturation because of a long period of being pro-genocide. John, come off mute and tell us what's on your mind.
Hey, Rick. Two questions. The first one is, you just made me think about the Greek culture. They're very bloodthirsty. Does this idea of the tragic inversion with the character flaw apply to a society as a whole? And if so, what would you say our current character flaw is as a society? And then the other question is, hold on a second. Okay, so we're here in modernity, and we have the character flaws, and also on this idea of the tragic inversion. I like this idea of the tragic inversion, right? You have your your issue is alcoholism, and that could have caused a tragic conversion in your life, but you kind of nipped it in the bud, which was a very, dynamic thing for you to do. But I think you talk about that I don't really understand how these work together is you talk about, or Kenneth Smith talks about, how Aristoi in today's society are, set out for basically doom because the society is working against them. So in that case, what is the motivation for somebody to fix a character flaw that they have, if, doing so is going to, I guess the idea is send them on the path towards being an Aristoi. If then, as an Aristoi, they're set for doom in today's society. So, I want you to kind of reconcile those two ideas, if you can. Thank you.
Sure. I have sadly already forgotten the first thing while I was listening to the second thing. So let me answer the second one while you remember what the first one is, and then you tell me again what the first one was. So the second one is, what's the point of fixing these character flaws? Well, if character is fate, if we don't fix the dysdaimonic parts of our own character, we're screwed. Right? I mean, if I don't address my alcoholism, my whole life's going to be a disaster. And the way I know is just to look at all my family members for generations on all sides. I've got some crazy ancestors. I mean, the kinds of people they make movies about because they're just batshit crazy. I can see very clearly where my life would end up. So, yeah, it might suck to move in an heuristic direction, but if I don't move in an heuristic direction, it's going to suck. So I deal with the immediate problem and then try to keep my head down and, try not to be the nail that sticks up until the moment comes when being the nail that sticks up can finally do some good and not just result in my destruction. So that's the thing about the second thing, is that the societies, the civilization. One of the things that's interesting about the Greek model of society and human beings is that they recognize that your culture shapes the character of each individual, and yet the character of each individual generates the culture. They see the feedback loop. We often don't. We often try to oversimplify it as one way or the other. Either people have no choice and they just become what their culture makes them, or culture has no influence whatsoever and people can do whatever they want, both of which are false. I mean, there's a dialectic between these things. And the Greeks recognized that. And it's built right into the model. So the thing about the difference between the culture and the character is the culture comes into play when I'm interacting with other people or with the artifacts of that culture, but my character comes into play 24 hours a day. So if I've got to pick where I'm going to have landmines, I'd rather have the landmines in the culture than in myself. And Socrates talks about this. He talks in some of Plato's. I was just hearing Hannah Arendt talk about this in the last couple of days. In some of Plato's dialogues, Socrates talks about how important it is not to be at odds with yourself. Because to be at odds with another person is, puts you in some trouble whenever you're interacting with that person. But you're always interacting with yourself. So if you're at odds with yourself, if you're not honest with yourself, if you've got bad character that's grabbing you, that is a much bigger problem than having the culture hostile to you. So you deal with the immediate problem and do what you can about the consequences for the other one. So ask me again what the first question was that you asked, John. Come off mute. And
The tragic inversion at the macro level of society as a whole. Do we have something like that going on?
Yes. So these are extraordinarily complicated issues. First of all, anytime, as Donald will say, from programming, anytime you get a feedback loop going on, the potential for complexity just blows through the roof. There's a kind of programming that we learn, that we save for special occasions, called recursion, and that's where instead of my program calling a subroutine, my program calls itself. And if you do it right, recursion can be astonishingly powerful, but it's very easy to do wrong. And if you do it wrong, you can cause massive catastrophic problems because you're in a tight, fast loop, coming back to yourself over and over. And that's the relationship between character and culture, is that you are in a tight, fast loop. So when we talk about the character that's inside of a person, it's a very complicated issue by itself. But when we talk about the character of the culture, it's a lot more complicated because it's being generated by the characters of all the people in that culture. And there's a diversity of characters in that culture. No matter how much the culture tries to make people in its own image, we each are born with our own, different desires and impulses, and we each have different life experiences. So we manifest that culture in our character in different ways. And all those different characters are pouring together into the culture in ways that sometimes reinforce each other and sometimes work against each other. So it gets complicated to talk about the character of a culture. It has one, according to this model, but it's a very complicated, and it's full of self-contradictions and so forth. You could even talk about issues like eudaimonia and dysdaimonia with regard to cultures. But again, it's tricky to do. Now, it's what Kenneth is doing in this paper and in his other works, is he's trying to talk about the character of modern cultures. And he's saying one of the things to understand is that modern cultures are what you get when you exclude one of the three character types from meaningful participation. And of the two remaining ones, the douloi and the banausoi, it is the banausoi who mostly generate this society, right? Because they're the ones. Banausoi can be successful as lawyers and as accountants and as MBAs and as planners, schemers, organizers, craftspeople, anything that requires an education and a lot of training to pick up is something the banausos can learn to do. And so the result is the economy, the politics, the very structure of society is of the banausoi, by the banausoi, and for the banausoi, to paraphrase Lincoln. It is an unusual form of civilization we've never seen before in the history of mankind. In the history of mankind, banausoi had to jockey for position with the other two character types. But in modern civilization, banausoi have the upper hand. And so they're remaking the human world in their own image as a system of systems of systems, a great machine, which is what they like. It's all very tidy and orderly and organized. And what that means, that's the entire body of work that Kenneth is doing. And he would argue that's also the body, even though she didn't use the words, that's also the body of work of Hannah Arendt's work and Philip Rieff's work and other modern existential philosophers are all exploring Nietzsche. Kierkegaard. They're all exploring these issues of what happens when this one character type comes to dominate the entire culture. And the rest of us just have to find some way to fit into the world that makes sense to them. So I know it's not the kind of answer you're looking for, but it's what I got. Sorry, John. Angelina, come off mute. Tell us what's on your mind.
Thanks, Rick.
Yeah, sorry, I missed a part of it today. I finished work late. Yeah, I guess I just wanted to say a few things, which is that, yeah, I mean, firstly, I mean, about the ancient Greeks, I just thought it's important to point out that, I mean, even Herodotus kind of noted that the Egyptians, they worship the same gods, but they just had different names. Now, I don't know what that was called back then, but I mean, I think in terms of Islam, that's called like theological inclusivism. So you kind of say you have the right, let's say, religious or nomenclature, or you have kind of, but the others also belong to that religion, but they don't know it, right? So I don't know if I would really, I kind of feel just now talking about that or thinking that about Herodotus and the ancient Greeks, I kind of see that level of them seeing themselves as the kind of the original polytheists in a way, if we were to take Herodotus' words, at least at some face value. But also, I mean, okay, maybe they didn't necessarily go to war for religion, but I mean, in terms of their own citizens, they kind of demanded absolute conformity to religion, right? I mean, for example, if a citizen, let's say, didn't conform to something, then the city, the polis, was kind of was persecuted, right? Maybe with plagues, with the military defeat. So, I mean, there was a kind of conformity, or let's say they would still try to apply some kind of monocultural practice when it comes to religion, at least with their own people. But again, as I said, like when I look at it through the modern lens of certain Islamic schools, yeah, it is this kind of theological inclusivism, and I'm not sure if that's really comes from tolerance. Anyway, I just wanted to kind of put that out there.
No, that's great, Angelina. Let's talk about that stuff. It's really interesting. So you're right that they liked to play connect the dots. Oh, your Thoth is like our Hermes. And so in the later Alexandrian period, in fact, in the Library of Alexandria, they used to just refer to them as Thoth Hermes. They just combine them into names like that. But they couldn't always find matches. And so when they couldn't find a match, they'd import the deity. So famously, Aphrodite didn't start out as a Greek goddess. I think Cyprus, right? Isn't it? Is she called Cypriot? She comes from the Middle East. And the Greeks knew that she came from the Middle East, and their myths said so. And they often gave her epithets that would say, what other land was it that she came from? And they did that with some, I think some of the others they did that with as well. So they would, and our Aphrodite is not a minor division. She's one of the 12. I mean, she's one of their core 12 Olympians. And even the Greeks record and remember that they didn't used to have her and they had to bring her in because once they ran into the great goddess of the Middle East, they're like, holy crap, we don't have a great goddess. We're screwed. We need a great goddess. How about you? You'll do. Come on in. You're gonna join our pantheon. Now there's not 11. Now there's 12. Because without the great goddess, oh no, we might be destroyed by the thing that we have underestimated in nature. So it's like the motivation isn't tolerance. They're not like, oh, we're all good people and let's all be peaceful. They love to fight, but it's like if we don't pay attention, if we miss something critical like that, we're doomed. So they were sort of driven by a sense that the sacred was incredibly important. And the last thing in the world they wanted to do was suppress somebody's speculations about the sacred. They wanted to find out, what if you're onto something and we're missing it? Now, the thing about conformance is really interesting. I mean, famously, Socrates was killed because of his position on the daimon. He was a religious, he was accused of being a religious heretic for describing the daimon in a way that was not compatible with the dominant religion. There's a couple things to note about that. And one of them is that it was nothing like the Spanish Inquisition. As Xenophanes says, he could have easily got out of it. Socrates could have easily bucked the charges, easily. He had like 3 or 4 different ways, and Xenophanes talks about them. But Socrates chose to die on purpose, not over the religious difference, but to make a philosophical point. Hannah Arendt has a whole section on this in Between Past and Future, where she talks about how Socrates understood that philosophy lacks teeth. Like political truth has teeth because it has armies and police behind it, and physical, natural truth has teeth because if you jump off the roof and you can't fly, you're going to break your leg, and that teaches you don't jump off the damn roof. But philosophical, moral truth often doesn't have teeth, even though it might be equally important. There isn't a way to compel people to do the right thing when it comes to truth or morality or what have you. And Socrates thought, well, what I can do is I can provide a powerful example. I can provide an example of someone who's willing to die for philosophical truth. And he believed that would have a massive cultural impact. It turned out he was right. We can't stop talking about Socrates. Kierkegaard has all kinds of places, and Nietzsche have all kinds of places where they're talking about Jesus in one breath, but they're talking about Socrates in the next breath. Saying a man who would die for philosophy, what does that tell us? And so Xenophanes' point is that Socrates didn't actually die over a religious issue. He died because he wanted to die to make a philosophical point. And he even says so in the Apology. That he could, of course, he could leave, of course, he could recant, of course, he doesn't want to. He wants to go this route and show that his commitment to philosophy is absolute. So when it comes to the orthodoxy that the Greeks demanded of their people, the interesting thing is, and you get some of this from Nietzsche's essay, Homer's Contest, that the Greeks, part of the way that they came out of the Dark Age was to create a religious core that they would share in common, and a set of practices like the Olympics that they would share in common. But everything else was fair game. So there's these 12 gods and some basic things about them, and everybody has to respect those 12 gods. But you can have any other gods you want. And every polis, had its own local divinities. They had weird versions of Artemis Brauronia, who Artemis is suddenly a big bear for some reason. Why is Artemis a bear? I don't know, but she's a bear. And in this one polis, in this one place, they have a whole bear ritual with Artemis dressed up as a bear, and nobody punished them for doing it because that was allowed under the compact that welded the Greeks together. It's like, as long as you respect these 12, you can be as crazy as you want with the rest of the religion. And what Socrates was doing was going right at the core of that agreement by saying, my daimon talks to me. And they're all saying, no, your daimon is the unconscious part of you. It never talks to you. It's your ethos. And you don't know what's going on in there. And that's what makes it so powerful. And he said, nuh-uh, it talks. It tells me things. So again, it was, there's any number of places he could have violated the religion, up to and including he could have worshipped a god or a goddess who wasn't part of the 12, and that would not have got him in trouble. It just, right? Aphrodite, they just brought her in. Oh, you guys have Aphrodite and we don't? Fine, let's add Aphrodite.
But I think there's a difference when it's sanctioned, in that case, by the state, and when it's some wayward fringe philosopher.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is a difference. I don't know. Maybe if he had brought in, I don't know, a goddess from, let's say, Mesopotamia or ancient India, maybe he would have got into trouble. We don't know. I think it depends if the state had sanctified that addition or not, which I'm guessing. Well, I don't know. By the way, just about that, I visited one of the 2 contested places where it said his prison was in Athens.
Nice.
And yeah, they've turned it into a tourist site, which is also ironic given the fact that there is like zero democracy now in modern day Greece. But yeah, they do really sell it to people, actually.
Of course.
One of the yeah. So it's
that's
yeah,
cool.
but
If I ever go to Greece, I want to see that too.
Yeah, it's an interesting place.
Thanks, Angelina. Yeah, it's funny because the Greeks are so forthright about fighting about everything else. There's plenty of things they'll fight over that they love to fight a lot. They loved it. But the point is, even if there were occasional issues like with Socrates, in general, the things that we associate with the Inquisition, the Crusades, and we sort of take for normal, and we think people must always have been like that. But the Greeks mostly weren't like that. They'd fight over everything else, but not that. Even the Romans, they didn't fight over religion. They fought over territory. We want everybody to be a province of Rome. But if you got a different religion, fine, we'll build a temple to whatever your thing is. That's fine. The Jews only got in trouble because they refused to accept the Caesar and the pantheon. If the Jews had not been monotheistic, if the Jews had said, we have our own God and we worship Caesar, and which they granted they would never have done, but if they weren't rejecting the center of the Roman religion, the Romans would have had no trouble with the Jews, other than, we're conquering you and we're killing as many as we have to win. Religious issues, even for the Romans, were just not central the way that we imagine they must be for all people in all times. And the point of bringing it up is just to emphasize that it's natural for modern people to assume that we know what human nature is and what human nature is not. But the whole point of this book is that we are fish in a particular kind of modern water. And everything that's distinctive about the modern world, we mistake for being universal because we've never experienced anything else. So we think that the weird ways that we are the ways that all people have always had to be. And Kenneth's trying to shake that up by showing us 3 different epochs and how different they are from each other. Stephen, come off mute and tell us what's on your mind.
Well, I'm going to say that this idea of peace between the polytheistic gods isn't always the case. There were times when it was the case, but, you know, with the ancient Egyptians, the followers of the different gods would riot. And the question was whether they could keep the peace. I think there was a sort of revolution in the Mediterranean world at that time, and that was, you know, the world of commerce had grown vastly. And if you want to do business, probably religious wars aren't always advantageous to business. It was a progressive world in material terms. You know, you had the Phoenicians sort of laid down the basis for the axial age. And they made the mistake of letting the Greeks learn their ideas. And then it started spreading all over the place. They colonized the Phoenicians, and the Greeks went and were battling each other over which Mediterranean coast they were going to control. But they were what the engine of it was, you know, was material trade. We're going to places with different gods, so they had to have a system of peace between the gods, but it wasn't always the case. I mean, you had Zarathustra. How did he convert the Medes and the Persians? I don't think it was entirely peaceful. So we're talking about people who, at a particular time, who followed a practical consideration. Of course, later on with the Greco-Romans, when they converted to Christianity, it did become a genocide of the old gods. But I'm going to say that I think you're wasting your time with the Aristos project, because modern people have no gods. They have no spirit. And without spirit, you cannot have an Aristos. I mean, what have you got for spirit, you moderns? You're all followers of Feuerbach. To you, the highest principle in the universe is man. You're humanists. You can never be Aristos because you're humanists. So I'd think about giving up, because without the gods, without spirit, there is no Aristos. These whether it's a fiction, it's not the point. But, you know, these ancient Greeks, they believed in the gods, even if it was Plato who thought a bit differently about the gods and the most sort of primitive mythic sort of fiction. But they felt there was definitely something beyond man, a higher principle. But for you moderns, there is no higher principle than man. That's where it ends for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. And that, in a nutshell, describes the flatland, right? That much of the problem of the modern world comes from the idea that nothing could be better than us. We're just the cat's meow. And the problem is We know enough history to know plenty of examples of us not being anywhere near the cat's meow. We've behaved badly many, many times, and we know it's possible to do better than that. So if whatever people are doing at the moment is the best that can ever happen, if that's the proposition of the modern order, then the modern order has to go and it has to be replaced with something that acknowledges that things can be better than this. Not only can they be better than this, they have already been better than this in my lifetime. I witnessed things better than this.
You're talking
And
about
thus,
externals.
I reject the proposition that it's impossible for things to be better than this when I already lived through things being better than this.
You're talking about externals. The
Yeah,
modern talks about externals exclusively.
yeah. This is the issue. There are every society only, and this is one of Hannah Arendt's core points, which I really love. I picked it up in the last month. This issue of natality. New people are born into the world, and contrary to official political theory, they never signed a social contract. They were never perfectly indoctrinated into the supposed value system of the society around them. And as a result, they introduce an element of agency into a system that thought it was perfectly machine-like and contingent, that everything would obey the programming. And instead, you get these weirdos who aren't having it, who don't like it, and who want things to be different. And so, even in the modern world, you have people born who have contra-modern tendencies. And it happens for two different reasons. It happens for the reason that Hannah Arendt says, that new people, you don't know what's going to occur to them. But it also happens for a reason that Kenneth Smith talks about, which is that each new epoch never fully digests the previous epoch. And so there are still fragments of old value systems. You can find people in the modern world who still want to be true to Jesus's message, even though that's a contra-modern thing to do. You can find people in the modern world who still want they become Hellenophiles and they want to live the eristic ethos. They want to be librarians at the Library of Alexandria. They want to build a temple. They get these people who have these old values, virtue and stuff. And modernity can't fully stomp them out. And as Arendt says, history is a dialectic between agency and contingency. You don't know at any given time whether one of these weirdos is going to pop up and become the next Stalin or Hitler or Martin Luther King Jr. You just it's impossible to predict in advance. But as long as you've got that diversity in play, it really makes it impossible to predict the future. So I agree with you about the general shape of our culture and the fact that it creates this flatland in which nothing is sacred, and that creates problems. The entire Greek concept of the Aristos is based on the sacred. The people who respect the sacred, in order to respect the sacred, they have to learn to hold their appetites and ideologies in contempt. It's the only way to create a space inside yourself for something other than your ideas and your experiences. And that's what makes it possible to care about the sacred in a meaningful way. So if there is no sacred, then what is it that you're filling that extra space with that you've recovered in your mind by not letting your noesis or gnosis be your master? And in the modern world, that's like, you're right. It's a major question.
So is it going to be a sacred God or
What's
a
it going to be?
sacred human?
What's it going to be?
If
Yeah.
you've only got the sacred human, the humanism, I think you're wasting your time.
Well, and that takes us to Nietzsche, doesn't it? Man is a problem that must be overcome. Man, by which we could have put in brackets, man as he occurs in the modern world is a problem that must be
Well, he rejected the gods.
Nietzsche.
He understood the ancient passion for the gods. But of course, he was a little bit of a modern himself because he had rejected the gods.
Of course.
Now, can I make myself a god?
I don't think he was trying to make himself a god. I think he was struggling to find a path back to vitalism. How can I be alive again when I've been modernized? How do I get out of this and find my connection back to the things that make me need to and want to live? Man, I wish he'd lived a little longer. I would have liked to see what he'd written next.
Well, his project wasn't finished,
No.
but his concept of will to power, I think people mistake that. When he's talking about the will to power, he's talking about the vital process.
Yes.
He's
Yes.
talking about, latency, you charge, you release power, and then you're back to latency again.
Yes.
And modern people don't understand that concept.
No.
The only thing is the power. I get the power. If I've got enough power,
Then I can do what I want. Whatever I
why
want.
use a key to open a door when I can open it with a sledgehammer?
Hulk
Power
smash.
is everything. Yes.
Hulk smash.
Wasn't talking about that sort of power.
No. Thank you, Stephen. Martin, welcome. Come off mute and tell us what's on your mind. Let's see. You got to find your mute button there. Yeah, I can't hear you. Do you see a mute button somewhere? Or an unmute rather? You'd be looking for unmute.
I finally found it.
Yay! Welcome,
Okay.
welcome.
All right. So that must say something about me as a human, but we'll leave that for another time. You're speaking of Nietzsche. Your comments about Nietzsche earlier, one of the things that stood out was that there was this opposition or protest to us all being equal. And it made me think of a similar principle, not quite the same thing, which is that all humans are basically more alike than different. It's based more on essences and attributes. And I was wondering what you thought about that idea.
Yes. Certainly, we're the same biological species, no question. And that gives us an enormous amount in common. That, but we're not clones. And so we have different ideas about what's the right thing to do. And that's where the diversity really plays out. And it's important because there's never been a perfect society. Nobody's ever had all the right answers. We need to be hearing a lot of contrary opinions, and evaluating them to see, who can come up with a better way forward than the way that we're going right now. So the diversity that nature naturally produces within us, within the frame of what we have in common, makes it possible for us to innovate. It's basically the relationship between we're all the same and we're all different is tricky with Homo sapiens, isn't it? We're obviously the same biological species, but
Yeah. My thinking is that that particular principle, if you could call it one, if it's held with any value, it helps people not to otherize quite so much.
yes, yes. Well, and it's
We're so diverse in so many ways, different religions, different cultures, different races, different this, different ages, different genders. And it's very easy to step into, oh, you're different, you're not good enough.
yeah,
So that's where I'm thinking this particular thought, this principle, this statement sort of reduces that, but I don't know if it universally does that. It does for me.
yeah. It's helpful. But I think we do have to confront the issue that we've been trained for 2,000 years to think different is bad, and that training should directly be confronted. And we should say, what if different is good? What if it's good that there's a variety of people? What if that's something we should embrace? Because, we, on the one hand, we have to have enough in common to cohere, but on the other hand, we have to have enough diversity to have real vitality as a people and as a species. Without that, if we successfully create a pure monoculture, we'll go extinct. Nature abhors a monoculture.
I think my argument would be that you can value difference, but if you don't value the universality,
Yes.
I think we get screwed.
Yes. Yes. And that takes us back to the medieval section we were doing before this interlude, where the question is if Jesus of Nazareth was arguing that these corrupt political systems, like he's writing at the time of the Caesars, saying these corrupt political systems aren't working for anybody. We need a new kind of kingdom. And in this new kind of kingdom, maybe instead of defining ourselves by how different we are from each other, we should define ourselves as brothers and sisters, and that we're all in this problem together and we got to solve it together. And his idea of what he called the kingdom of God basically meant a kingdom that's not ruled by a person, a fallible human being, and that's not defined by who do we exclude, but it's defined by including everybody and, taking care of each other. This is the beginning of the meals, the weekly meals that they would have together, and let's all sit down together and support each other and blah blah blah. This goes with what you're saying, Martin. This is about this idea that at the foundation of any project to create a society has to be a recognition that we have a lot in common. There's a universality. Yeah.
Diversity is incredible. I mean, it adds such a richness and such an innovation and such productivity. But that doesn't mean we're all not on some level pretty damn similar.
Yeah, right. Genetically, it's like, oh my God. and the genetics are basal character within which the diversity can only occur within that frame. And the frame it tells us what we have in common, which is most of it. You're right. I mean, the fact that we had a certain age and as a pretty young one, we all start babbling, regardless of what the language is. It's like we want to talk. We want to emit. We want to hear. We want to mimic. This is a need that we distinctively have, all of us, and it unites us.
Can I make another comment too?
Please, yeah, go ahead.
One of the I hadn't been to any previous meeting on this subject, so it took me a while to start to get an understanding of what was being addressed. But maybe I'm totally wrong here, but it almost comes across as if we were addressing how the Greeks generated their philosophy, which in many ways today's world would be called their psychology, and about character. And and then we got to Hegel and to some extent Nietzsche, who sort of took some spins off of that and it enhanced it further.
Yes.
But the next step seemed to be Sigmund Freud, who still took the same triad with ego, id, superego. But he added a really murky dimension, the unconscious.
Yes.
Which goes to your comment about yourself and about your thought about others, is we got to own our own junk or bullshit, I think was the quote.
Yes.
And if you're not aware of it, it's really hard to own it.
Right.
And there are many, many studies that demonstrate that humans are more self-deceptive than they are other deceptive.
Yes.
And getting to that ownership ain't always the easiest thing in the world. And especially if people are given to their appetites,
right.
Self-reflection or introspection hardly ever occurs.
Right. Right.
You don't even look inside, let alone own it.
Yeah. It's a major challenge. It's one of the things that Kenneth Smith says is that to do this kind of excavation in your own character, in your own unconscious, and dig around and try to figure out what freight am I carrying? He says it is not unlike Sisyphus rolling a boulder up a hill. It is, you're going to be working at that your whole life. Even Heraclitus, writing, 550 BCE says, the task of exploring your own soul takes your entire life, because it's like there's an infinite amount of nature around us we spend all our lives trying to learn about. And Heraclitus says, yeah, and you must, but also there is an infinite amount of nature inside you too. You spend your whole life searching and not get to the bottom of it, but you still have to search because, whatever you can find, you have to find and try to get a handle on. It's a major challenge. It's a major challenge. And so, this is where culture comes into play. Does the culture teach children that this is something they should do? That your anger is your own to manage? That your bad parts of your character are your own to cultivate in a better direction, and that it's your job not somebody else's job never to make you angry, right? And I bring up this because anger management, is a classic example of an area where people who have a history with lashing out when they're angry, when they get anger management training, they're very surprised to discover it is possible to create distance between stimulus and response. Just because someone makes you angry doesn't mean your fist has to go out. You can actually feel the anger and just sit there with it and think about it. It's like, well, apparently I'm angry. What would be a constructive thing to do with this anger? It never occurred to them before. Nobody in their life had ever told them that they had the ability to not be a prisoner of their own anger. And it's just such an aha experience. The light bulb goes on when they find this part of themselves that they can manage.
There are many theorists that contend that all our emotions have a visceral component.
Yeah.
And an impulse attached to them, much as you describe anger as having an impulse. And that anger can often be one of those things where the impulse sort of overrides any kind of thought. Or now, anger can serve us so well.
Yes.
Somebody earlier was talking about con artists, and it's important to be fearful or at least angry at being conned. And I think you used the word intuition, but that intuition is served by an emotional response that then is utilized where judgment comes next.
Exactly.
But yes, there are some people who don't let that judgment come in.
Exactly. No one ever told them it was possible. Yeah. They didn't know you could, right? It just never occurred to them. Yeah. These are such interesting issues. And the thing that's fascinating about it is, all of this stuff sort of went underground for 1,000 years during the medieval period before Hegel and others began, after the Renaissance, began picking it up again. There's a line in the history of philosophy where Hegel expresses his astonishment upon discovering Heraclitus. He says, "Man, have you read this stuff? This is amazing." He says, we may only have fragments, he says, but there's not a single fragment of Heraclitus that I haven't looked at and said, wow, I need to overhaul my philosophy and build it around this idea. And so, all of these ideas, this Greek philosophical anthropology or psychology, as you say, it's part of why for us, these German existentialists are strongly related to this ancient Greek model, is they were the ones who sort of found it again after all that time and said, wow, we have been missing out. I want to make something out of this. This is interesting. So anyway, welcome to the calls. This is the stuff we're digging into in this interval. And I don't know, it'll be a few more months that we'll go through this interlude, and then we'll eventually go back to the original project, which is we looked at the ancient epoch and its worldview. We're in the middle of looking at the medieval epoch and its worldview, and at the end, and that'll take another year and a half. And then at the end of that, we'll look at the modern world from the perspective of the ancient and medieval world, and say, what can we learn about ourselves from armed with their perspectives that we could never figure out when we only had our own perspective, because fish out of water problem. So anyway, welcome. Thank you for your comments.
Thanks for the review.
Ari, come off mute and tell us what's on your mind.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. Yeah, I'm actually reflecting on something John had said a while back, and you spoke nicely, and to the point where it's just messy. But I wanted to give some clarity, hopefully, to the mess about this tragic inversion of the modernity. And we talk about this a bunch in the group, and I feel like one of the things you said in a previous meeting, I can't remember the exact source of who says this, but something along the lines of, we don't want to judge, maybe it's Kenneth, that we don't want to judge humanity or any species on its sickly behavior. We want to judge it on its excellent behavior. It's arete, right? And so is that
That's
correct, right?
Yeah.
Aristotle. Okay, so in this case, I'm thinking about what do humans do, and then what does it sometimes look like when it's absolutely excellent? And I was thinking that, like, essentially with religion, if you're talking about, let's say, ancient religions being useful things, again, to make Stephen's point, they're trying to make business, which is also to some degree an arete to be excellent when you do it right. Religion is essentially creating a cooperation mechanism for them to be able to trust each other and organize, and just a coordination solution. This is what like anthropologists like Yuval Harari rain on about, like the value of religion being the great unifier. But economics is also the great unifier, and politics is also the great unifier. Whenever humans do something right, sports is the great unifier. Whenever there's an aspect of things done well, it really brings people together at different levels. You can have sports as just a few guys and they form a great team, or and even like war and battle. It's weird. You have this great unification aspect of it. And in its limit, I think the key is here is when it's in its limited zone of some sort of what I like to call a Goldilocks zone. Seems like everything life has to have a Goldilocks zone. Not too cold, not too hot. Literally, cold almost is like order, and heat is chaos. You need a certain amount of movement and a certain amount of order. And so I'm thinking about, like, really a lot of the tragic inversions are when these things are supposed to be used in their original form, and then they're completely the opposite. So I'm thinking like someone like Jesus, who's like trying to create religion to bring people together in brotherly love, and then it's his name that's killing a whole bunch of people. Like, that's a tragic inversion, that he's trying to create unity, and instead it leads specifically to empire taking over it and using it for genocide. And then similarly, like maybe economics too, with Adam Smith, especially before he writes The Wealth of Nations, he writes the what's it, the Something of Sentiments. And this is all about how it's supposed to serve other things. So it's a lot. I see, like, this is what the sacred is as well in the Aristoi. As long as they're worshiping something outside of themselves, but even still, like, humanity itself is outside of yourself. Like Kant is taking that, humans are an end to themselves. That's great when it's an end, not the end, right? When it's in a dialectic. And this is where I go to, like, maybe what you're talking about with the ancient religions being useful, because there was a healthy, almost like an ecosystem, and they were interplaying with each other. And in an ecosystem, like any Goldilocks zone, you have like cooperation in a healthy range where it's servicing competition, and competition is in a healthy range where it's servicing competition. And this also goes with the douloi of the benousoi. Like, if the douloi is slave to their appetites, this is my neuroscience smuggling it in. I'll just reveal it rather than try to hide it. That I see this as someone who's in their appetites and their feelings. Like Martin was saying, they're guiding you to an impulse in the now. Like, you're not going to feel like, oh, when like my children get married in 10 years from now or something like that, I'm going to be happy now. You're like, okay, that idea might be, but like, no, our feelings are reflecting of the now. And so if we're in our appetites, those are about essentially guiding us in the moment, and attaching us or anchoring us in the present. And abstraction and language seem to be human super ability to sort of model outside of the now. We're able to then create or cultivate, for better or for worse, futures through words and other symbolic representation that are outside of the now. And so it's like, if the benousoi is trying to control explicitly almost like everything, and like universalize or gamify or always whatever, that's living in systems, that's like avoiding the now. And then the douloi is like, can't systemize anything. They're just like a zombie who just needs to eat and fill their appetite, always in the now. But the interesting thing that I think about the moderns is it's not that, I don't know if Kennedy is going to say this, but I really feel like it's something more like, come on, after virtue. Who's the
Alistair McIntyre.
Thank you. Alistair McIntyre talks about a lot. That is this basically this worship of humanism, or essentially nihilism, or basically rejection of teleology, and that results in emotivism, and that we're just slaves to our feelings. But then our systems, like, think about all the people who want to win, who want to like not be engaged in, they recognize modernity is kind of a trap, that you can't fix modernity. So it's kind of like, I'm either going to be a predator, or I'm going to be a prey. And in this case, the predator is only living to satisfy their desire to like conquer the prey, but not actually then eat and live, and like a cheetah would then rest and all the other things. So there's something strange about, I'm thinking like demagogues and even the mob, whenever there's power, it's only if, and that's to systematize, there's only like that is to service your emotivism. So at the end of the day, even the benousoi are stuck as douloi, but they're building something on top of that to service their appetites. It's like, again, like humanism is nihilism. There's this idea that is a certain emotivism to it, and I need to feel good about my humanism. And it's like I'm trapped in my feelings, and then my systems can only serve my feelings. So that's weird that like the future is only supposed to capture the now, as opposed to like, wait, let's actually build a future. So I know I'm going off in some deep, weird things that I'm not unpacking, but there's a strange like tragic reversal of the douloi and the banausoi now, that I almost feel like a modern adult who is a banausoi is still only servicing their douloi. They're only servicing their appetites. I win the game so I can have all the money, so I can buy all the stuff I want and have all the women I want, or those are all my wants. I want. Those are all my appetites. There's no escape from the appetite. So there's something underneath this that I feel like Alistair McIntyre talks about, maybe the underneath of this, of the douloi, I'm equating to the emotivism. That is what I feel, and that's because there's no teleology of a sacred. And it's like, and I think that's enough, but it's something like, to that tragic inversion, is you see a tragic inversion in modern times with everything that is supposed to be a cooperation solution to exemplify human excellence, where we're essentially creating better systems that allow ecosystems to thrive on a level they've never been able to before. When that's actually a definition, I would say excellence is true, not just alignment with ecosystems, but a cultivation of this alignment that's creative, where there's excellence that's bringing out a greater level of productivity, not productivity in the classic, like the modern way, but like a thriving jungle, like a really, really thriving ecosystem that can do more things and be more sustainable. And so it's like, when you have an excellence of arte, you're going to see that. Like when religion is doing well, when politics is doing well, and when economics is doing well, and even warfare to some degree is doing well. It's about to create, like, to burn down the old forest so you can have the new forest grow. There's something about that as well that needs to happen. And there's this also this stuck in like me. I think it's this forgetting that we should, like, a true Aristoi is interested in this intergenerational aspect. Like, I want to pass something on to future humans who then can build culture or continue the building of culture. And if you ever stuck that I'm the now and that's the forever. And I feel like that's the trap of the ego that doesn't want to is terrified of death and terrified of like things outside of the self. If you could embrace death, like have a healthy relationship with the Thanatos and the Eros, like, these kind of things, then you're like on the road to Arete, where you're in that Goldilocks zone. But again, on the road to is different than like, I can do it right now. And I feel like maybe the modern trap, again, with all of our instant gratification, is we're playing a short game. We're trying to just own the short game, and all of these things are truly what's it called, these are all long games. And the long game is like, the short game is, I'm a blade of grass that's going to be like fertile in spring, and then in autumn I'm cut down. That's every human. That's right. So in the long game, it's like, I want to make the grasses grow for, it's just, there's something about being more than just a blade of grass. There's something about being a part of the grassland or the whole ecosystem. And when all of these different things, like even like sports, you name it, I don't know, there's probably anything that you could name, like any drug, it can be used as medicine, right? But oftentimes medicine without the proper dose, without the proper anesthesia, that's instant death, right? That's nasty, right? So all of these is like a Goldilocks zone. And I feel like that dialectic style is really what the modern people are missing. Because when Martin was talking about these things, the universal of being in, that we're all have so much in common. Yeah, that's great. But the failure mode of that is that's all we are. And similarly, the failure mode of we're all individuals. We have nothing in common. But when you put those together and you get some sort of healthy Goldilocks that can modulate between these things, now we're talking about something that could, create, again, diversity and like ecosystems and like thriving. And I feel like this is also what Nietzsche was really talking about with the will to power, something to cultivate our vitality, to get out of these traps. But I think that's whenever the tragic inversion is, you have the trap, and it's like, yeah. Anyways, I've spoken too long. Thanks for listening.
You're great, Artie. Thank you. Your excitement, enthusiasm, and creativity are fantastic. Thank you. It's a blast. Yeah, there is stuff here. When we start to see, what's interesting about these models is that, in the modern world, we get in all these debates about, do people have free will or is it just deterministic? As though those are the only two choices. Either it's all one or it's all the other. We do a lot of oversimplification and zero summing, and it leads us into cognitive traps we can't think our way out of. And then you look at these alternatives like ethos anthropoi daimon, which says, well, if you don't cultivate your character, then your life will be deterministic. But if you do cultivate your character, then you can change your fate. And now you have some free will that you have generated for yourself through the act of self-cultivation. But again, if you don't do it, you don't get any. This is a model that has feedback loops and nuance and the ability to be hyper expressive. So you start putting these different pieces together of this worldview, and you realize that the potential impact on economics, politics, religion, the planning for the future, it's huge. It's kind of mind-blowing to try to figure out, how would these things go together in a healthy way to create a healthier human ecosystem than what we have now. I mean, the one thing that we can say about the ecosystem we have now is it's not doing very well. There are many problems in the world today, and many of the problems are not unsolvable problems, except that people have made them so that you're not allowed to change them. You're not allowed to fix it. So yeah, let's wrap up here for today. We'll pick this up again next week. For those of you just joining us, I hope you had a good time. This is the kind of thing we like to do in these. We have a text, we use the text and go through it, but we also spend a lot of time letting people react and respond and bring their own experiences. The whole point is to philosophize together rather than to check particular boxes. So this is as Ari often says, this is the high point of my week. I love spending time with you all. Have a great week, and I'll see next week as many of you as would like to come.